Talking about the Black Panthers today. Not the movie that is still in theaters, that has already made roughly $1.5 billion worldwide. Seriously, against a $210 million budget, as if Disney needed even more money. Good God. Pretty soon, we Americans will be living in the United States of Disney. Not talking about the large cats that look super cuddly, but could easily claw your face off, right off your skull, and then pop what's left of your skull like a grape in its powerful bad kitty jaws. Talking about the Black nationalist African-American revolutionary group that kicked off in 1966, the Black Panther political party that rose from the ashes of Malcolm X and stood as a fierce, fighting example of Black power during the civil rights turmoil of the 1960s. Talking about a very complicated, very polarizing group of freedom fighters and neighborhood protectors. Not an easy topic for a white dude to cover, especially one living in Idaho, but I'm just dumb enough to give it a go. May Nimrod have mercy on my soul. The Black Panthers have a complex history. They fought for racial equality. They fought for a better future for Black children. They fought the police. They fought the FBI. They fought other revolutionary groups. They fought each other. They did a lot of fighting. And we're going to thoroughly suck their fight that was at times incredibly inspirational and at other times, at best, morally questionable and almost always controversial today on Timesuck.
You're listening to Timesuck.
Happy Monday, Timesuckers. Where can fucking wait? Happy Black History Month to my melatonin-enhanced meat sacks. Hail Nimrod, hail Lucifina, praise Bojangles and Triple M. Thoughts go out to our Australia suckers devastated by recent terrible catastrophic flooding. Read that over 20,000 homes may have been lost. Just devastating. Hope all of you listeners over there are A-OK. Timesuck is brought to you again today by the Broem podcast. Broem is a show about how it's okay to be a dude, but all dudes should be better dudes. Each week on Broem, Joe and Ben pick a topic that they think dudes could use a little help with. And based on what I've heard so far, this is fantastic info, not just for dudes, but for all meat sacks. How to enjoy art, how to talk to women, how to build wealth, how to navigate discussions of different types of relationships. The guys are going to be talking about how your place is gross and how to fix it this week. Joe and Ben will share ideas on how to make your place less disgusting. Practical tips like get white towels so you can bleach them when you forget them in the washer for 2 days, and then you don't have to spend the rest of your life smelling like mold and mildew. Joe asked me to share any cleaning tips I have, but I'm a filthy dirtbag, and I should probably listen to this episode of Broem. A lot of great topics honestly discussed, so give it a shot. Tune in each week for new topics, new discussions, and new ways to continue seeking enlightenment through deadlifts. A podcast ran by timesuckers and space lizards. Broem. Broem it up. BROAUM.com for more info. Link in the episode description. You can push a button on the Timesuck web or app. Website. Why do you call it web? Website. It's called web. I don't know. Something. You know what I'm talking about. Thanks to the Space Lizards monthly Patreon contributions that now allow us to give $1,600 this month to the Cancer Research Institute. Hail Nimrod. The Cancer Research Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to harnessing the human body's immune system's power to control and potentially cure all types of cancer. They fund the most innovative clinical and laboratory research around the world, support the next generation of the field's leaders, serve as a trusted source of information on immunotherapy for cancer patients and caregivers. Thanks to anyone also who recently purchased our Valentine's Day themed Timesuck pins. Check them out in the Timesuck Shopify store. Don't have to be just for Valentine's. Along with recent meat sack sweatshirts, so many other fun goodies. Thank you to Access Apparel for creating so many fun goodies with us, and thank you to Danger Brain for creating so many fun designs. Recording this in advance of the Madison, Wisconsin shows. Hope they were amazing. Hope they went well. Bringing the Happy Murder Tour to Philly this week. Get to the punchline. Shows in Salt Lake City at Wise Guys next week downtown. Some shows already sold out. Hail Nimrod for that. And then the Stardome in Birmingham, Punchline in Atlanta. That show is now sold out. Contacted the venue about trying to add a second show. Don't know if that'll happen. Zany's in Nashville. Stand Up Live in Huntsville, Alabama. Check out dancummins.tv for a full year of fun shows. More live time sucks coming up in Cleveland, Nashville, Spokane, San Francisco, Orlando, Phoenix, Denver, Grand Rapids, and Tacoma. Time right now for the Black Panthers. To understand the Black Panthers of the 1960s, to understand why this organization was ever thought up or formed in the first place, you have to understand what life was like for many Black Americans in America in the 1960s as best you can, particularly those living in urban areas. This is one of those sucks where context, real important, like super duper important. Before I head down the road of today's suck, just know that I love my black meat sacks, my white meat sacks, and my law enforcement meat sacks. All of you. Probably going to hit that note several times today. You know, this is just you'll see as we go through this episode why I say this now, but it is just, it's a polarizing topic for a variety of reasons. It's very complex. Obviously, as a white man, I can't personally speak to what it is like to live as a Black American in this or in any era. Not going to try to do so. Although, according to my 23andMe results, I am in fact 0.3% Sudanese, 0.1% Sub-Saharan African. Not kidding about acting like that gives me any right to talk about anything. Not kidding about the results. But yes, obviously my results do not enlighten me in any way whatsoever to the historical struggle and plight of many Black Americans. Before I dive into the meat of this episode, just know that I do realize I'm white as fuck. I know I can't personally relate to widespread racial discrimination on any level. Just found this story fascinating, wanted to suck it, follow where the truth and logic took me. Meat sacks of all color, including myself, all rationally, critically thinking, empathetic meat sacks can, I hope, at least understand what it's like to struggle. Hope we all at least recognize, that others are struggling and can empathize with them to some degree. We're all part of the same human experience. Another important disclaimer before I go further, I am very racist. I just want you to keep that in mind when it comes to Polish people. Many of you know that I have some extreme prejudice, and that's not widely accepted, my views. So I just want you to know that I'm not ready to accept the Polish people as full-fledged humans quite yet, and that's my right. And I'm done with that tired joke now for this episode. I just can't seem to stay away from it. It just keeps popping up in my head. No, real disclaimer now. When it comes to issues that involve race, just like politics, religion, gender, etc., things have a tendency to leave the arena of logic and enter the realm of emotion real quick. It's sensitive shit. And that is why I'm going to throw out some numbers to kick off the show. A little bit of math. Numbers that make the case that life on average was unquestionably way fucking harder for Black Americans than it was overall for white Americans in the 1960s, as it still is overall today. And that's not my opinion. That's a statistical fact. Has been documented by numerous comprehensive nonpartisan studies time after time after time. And if you're thinking, well, I'm not Black, life isn't easy for me, I'm struggling, I worry about rent every month. I know plenty of Black people way better off than my poor white ass, making more money than me, making more money than my family ever has. I struggle far more in every meaningful way than the people I know are struggling. What the fuck, dude? I get it. Your feelings are valid. Your struggle is real. Your hardships are very real. Hell yes, they are not denying that one bit. But this suck isn't about comparing one individual life or the lives of one particular neighborhood or community to another isolated life or another isolated community or neighborhood. It's about cultural trends. It's about trends, overall tendencies for the nation itself. On average, members of every race but African American doing better than members of African descent in the United States, because statistically, when it comes to average education level, average income, average incarceration rate, no one has had a rougher go of it than Black Americans. There are roughly a metric shit ton of stats that back this claim up. And these aren't liberal agenda numbers taken from, some nonsense place for my more socially conservative listeners. This isn't from the liberal media, quote unquote, take a deep breath, grab a stress ball, squeeze it. The numbers I'll be relaying to you today are not gathered from whiteguilt.snowflake. They haven't been taken from socialjusticewarrior.crymeafucking-river. They're taken from either the U.S. Bureau of Labor, the U.S. Census Bureau, or the U.S. Bureau of Justice. And if you think that those organizations are conspiratorially motivated in favor of the plight of Black Americans, well, you're not a logical person. You might as well turn this off now. There's quite literally nothing I can say to make any of this appealing to you. For those of you still listening, hopefully everyone, here are some numbers. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the average household income for a white household in 2017 was $65,273. Average household income, 2017, for a white family. The average household income for a Black household, $40,258. That means that white households made just as recently as 2017, on average, over 62% more than Black households. Hope you appreciate those numbers. My dumbass had to relearn how to use Microsoft Excel to gather those. Why? U.S. Census Bureau, why? Put it in a fucking PDF like every other place would do. Anyway, U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics taken between 2014 and 2016 showed that the average household income for Black Americans was lower than any other ethnic group, lower than white, American Indian, Hispanic, multi-race, Pacific Islander, and Asian. Back in 1967, the earliest year that the U.S. Census Bureau data exists for U.S. household income by race, and this is just 2 years after the Panthers were formed. No, 1 year after, actually. The disparity was even greater. And we'll get into the Timesuck timeline for the Panthers here soon. But yeah, back in 1967, the median household income for whites, $44,700, compared to $24,700 for blacks. White people made just under 81% more money than black people on average. That's crazy. That's some serious disparity. No consolation to you if you're some poor as fuck white person living in 1967, but clearly overall, Black Americans not doing nearly as well as white Americans. And racist, discriminatory practices, culturally, politically, played a large role in that difference. How could they not? According to the 2015 U.S. Census statistics, around 36% of white Americans have at least a bachelor's degree, compared to roughly 22% of black Americans. Almost 64% more common for white people on average to have a bachelor's degree than black people as recent as 2015. The gap was even wider back in 1965. And this is right around when the Black Panther Party was formed, the year before. Around 51% of white Americans had graduated high school compared to only 27% of black Americans. Whites on average were almost 89% more likely to have a 4-year college degree than black Americans, damn near 90% more likely to hold a college degree. Discrimination for sure playing a large role here. Generations of discrimination following centuries of actual literal enslavement. Now let's talk about incarceration. According to 2016 Bureau of Justice prison statistics, black Americans made up 12% of the total U.S. population, but made up 33% of the total U.S. incarcerated population, currently serving prison sentences. And I only add that little caveat because that differentiates these numbers as people having sentences as opposed to people who just might be being held for like an upcoming trial or something. White Americans made up 64% of the total population, made up 30% of the prisoner population. In 2016, black Americans were incarcerated at over 5 times the rate of white Americans. That's an alarming disparity. That one was actually not worse in the 1960s. It was just as bad. In 1960, blacks were also incarcerated 5 times as often as whites. So why the 1960s? Why did the Black Panthers form in this decade? Well, because as bad as things still were, things were getting better due to the civil rights movement, and they were supposed to be getting a lot better. It was now safer to be visibly and publicly furious about racial mistreatment, thanks to the new counterculture movement than it was like a decade before. Now that it was finally a little safer to show your anger, centuries of pent-up rage were pouring out of many African Americans. We've talked about the counterculture movements of the 1960s in previous sucks, such as the suck of Charles Manson, Jim Jones, Children of God sucks, amongst others. The American youth of all races were questioning authority very differently than their parents or grandparents had. There was just a growing distrust of the government, partly to do with the the growing Vietnam conflict, partly to do with the JFK assassination. An inspiring leader of many young Americans in the early 60s was JFK, and then assassinated in 1963, and many believed the government had a hand in it. I still kind of believe that today. Citizens were questioning the government at levels not seen since the buildup to the Civil War. Many white youths were strongly opposed to the racial segregation of their parents' and grandparents' generations, or grandparents. They were embarrassed by it. They also opposed the growing conflict in Vietnam. Young black Americans particularly disillusioned in the 1960s. They just seen their fathers and grandfathers fight in World War II and the Korean War just as honorably as white soldiers, then come back to a segregated country that did not honor them the same as they honored white soldiers, made them use different bathrooms, sleep in different hotels, shop in different stores, go to different schools. They were still being drafted into the military to fight honorably for a country that they didn't feel was treating them honorably and wasn't. For a more comprehensive look into racial segregation, by the way, you can revisit the Ku Klux Klan suck or the Martin Luther King Jr. suck. I assure you it existed. The Civil Rights Act was passed in 1960, a federal law that established inspection of local voter registration polls, and introduced penalties for anyone who obstructed someone's attempt to register to vote. And then the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, which ended segregation in public spaces and banned employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or nationality. Years of fighting and marches and protests and spilled blood and beatings and death led to the passage of this legislation, and things were now supposed to be better, except they really weren't. Life for the average black American did not actually get that much better after this legislation was passed. Not immediately, anyway. And there was a feeling of betrayal, of great betrayal. Why had so many sacrificed to pass this new legislation to end racial discrimination, only to see new laws not being enforced in many places, or people finding loopholes to get around these laws and still be very discriminatory? Imagine running the longest race of your life. Like, you don't think you can finish. Your body's starting to revolt. Your muscles are cramping up. You're feeling dizzy. Your lungs have been burning for miles. You got blisters on your feet that are starting to bleed. Your knees aching a little more with every step. But then way out in the distance, you see that finish line. The thought of crossing that finish line is the only thing that's keeping you running, right? The only thing psychologically motivating you is, okay, I just got to get there. I just got to get there, and then this is over. And then I accomplished it. I finished this race. And then with the last of your strength, you cross that line, you collapse in victory, you did it. It took everything, but you made it. Now imagine as you lay there, your lungs are on fire, your lips are cracked from miles of hard breathing. Imagine some asshole standing over you saying, what the fuck are you doing? This race isn't over. This race will never be fucking over. You run all you want. You will never finish. You will never win. I imagine that is roughly how the 1960s felt on some level to many black Americans. They won, and then they asked to see what was behind door number 3, and it turned out to be someone holding a big sign that just said, more of the fucking same. I mean, imagine just anybody. Imagine the feelings of rage you would have. How dare you? Black Americans continue to suffer widespread discrimination, economic, social inequality after the passage of that legislation. Many black Americans have been moving to the cities of the North and the West for jobs, moving to downtown areas in the 40s and 50s, this great migration, only to find those jobs then relocate to the suburbs. Many black populations ended up getting concentrated in poor urban neighborhoods called ghettos, full of rampant unemployment, substandard housing, widespread social problems such as drug use and crime. Black Americans saw themselves continuing to be excluded from political representation, universities, all sorts of employment areas, social strata such as the middle class. And I know you can point to examples of black Americans who did grow up in the ghettos at this time, went to college, became doctors, lawyers, accountants, scientists, professors, and more, who made good livings and pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, so to speak. Those examples are real. But I feel like you also have to admit it's a lot harder to pull yourself up by your bootstraps if it feels like almost everyone in the country is stomping on your fucking boots all the time. I've experienced racism as a white man in small ways here and there throughout my life. I've personally not been considered for various comedy festivals, mostly when I was younger in comedy in the past, because they would just tell me straight up some version of the quote, we already have enough white guys. I have had that said to me. You know, I've had TV concepts I wanted to pitch get rejected before even getting looked at because the network was looking for quote, more diversity in programming, which is code for anything but more straight white dudes. I mean, that is a form of racial discrimination, and it pissed me off every time it happened, but there was always another job waiting for me if I wanted to work hard enough for it. What if I never experienced anyone considering me for a job because of my skin color? What if there wasn't any other doors being opened? You know, I haven't experienced ever an entire community, an entire nation taking a look at me and just being, nope, next, go on, get out of here. I've never lived in constant fear of incarceration because, racist police officers patrol my neighborhood hoping to beat me or beat someone who looked like me with a club. And I only bring all this up to illustrate that life was indeed harder for black Americans than white Americans in the 1960s. And that is why the Black Panthers formed, right? They formed, they'd been watching Martin Luther King. You know, many people have been trying more peaceful protests. That wasn't going well all the time. And some people were sick of trying to go that route. And we're like, no, man, let's get fucking mad. Let's get angry and let's take what's ours, type of attitude. And then before the Panthers come along, Malcolm X came along. Malcolm X paved the way for the Panthers. Without Malcolm X, there would be no Black Panthers. The Panthers heavily influenced by the teachings of Malcolm X. A man who will be a subject of a future suck, I'm positive. Malcolm X, born as Malcolm Little, was a preacher's son. His father was also an early black nationalist named Marcus Garvey, who died after being hit by a streetcar, quite possibly murdered by white supremacists strongly opposed to his pro-black messages. His death left Malcolm's family with little income, such little income that Malcolm's mother cooked dandelion greens she'd picked on the street to feed her kids at one point. That's when you know you were super poor. Like, I'll joke about growing up poor and eating a lot of hamburger helper, small town Idaho, but someone like Malcolm would say, you got to eat meat? You weren't fucking poor. You ate meat? Eating burger? Dandelion broth, made from dandelions picked from cracks in the sidewalk. That's poor. Malcolm's mother was then committed to an insane asylum when he was 14. I imagine it's hard to not lose your goddamn mind when you're making your kids dandelion broth. Malcolm ended up getting raised the last few years of his childhood in foster homes by other family members. After serving a 7-year prison stint for robbery he committed at age 21, he became a prominent black nationalist leader and minister for the Nation of Islam. And Malcolm X came to be known nationally initially because of an incident of police brutality in New York City. Police brutality, more than any other single issue, would lead to the formation of the Black Panthers. On April 26, 1957, Hinton Johnson, a member of the Nation of Islam, and 2 other passerby, also Nation of Islam members, witnessed police officers beating a young black man with their nightsticks. When Johnson shouted, "You're not in Alabama, this is New York," and tried to help the man, one of the officers turned on him and beat the shit out of him with his club, beat him within an inch of his life. Johnson suffered brain contusions and subdural hemorrhaging. And then after the beating, all 4 black men were arrested. Someone who witnessed the event found and told Malcolm X, and he and a small group of black Muslims went to the police station and demanded to see Johnson. Police initially lied, told him that Johnson wasn't even being held there. But then when a crowd of other African Americans hearing about the beating, and gathering outside the station grew to about 500 people, the police officers did allow Malcolm X to speak with Johnson. Once Malcolm X saw what had been done to Johnson, he insisted on an ambulance taking him to Harlem Hospital. Johnson was taken to the hospital, his injuries were treated, and by the time he was returned to the police station, roughly 4,000 people were now gathered outside the station. An angry mob had formed. Authorities were getting nervous. Shit was tense. Inside the station, Malcolm X, an attorney, made bail arrangements for 2 of the Muslims. Johnson was not bailed, but police did say he could go back to the hospital until his arraignment the following day. Malcolm X hadn't won the war, but he won a battle with officers that day. And so he stepped outside the station house. He motioned for the crowd to be quiet. Once they were quiet, he farted one time, just one time, loudly, powerfully, poetically, triumphantly. It was the signal the crowd had been waiting for, and they stormed the station. In the end, 50 riders, 35 police officers died, an additional 65 officers, 172 riders were wounded, 4 structures, including the precinct, burned to the ground in the clash that followed that fateful fart. The riot, that riot is the origin of the term Bronx Cheer. That's right, the Bronx Cheer can be traced back to Malcolm X in 1957. It's also known as the fart heard around the world. And that's not true. If Malcolm X farted that, this shit's so heavy. I got to lighten it up from time to time. If Malcolm X farted that day, no one wrote about it. He didn't say anything. And it's not relevant to the story. What really happened, he did come outside, he gave a hand signal to the crowd, and the crowd dispersed. They knew what the hand signal was. One police officer would later say, no one man should have that much power. Within a month, I'm guessing he said some other things that weren't quoted in the text. Within a month, the New York City Police Department arranged to keep Malcolm X under surveillance. Tensions between the police and the black community in New York and around the country were growing. It was issues like this that pushed Malcolm X to hate not only police officers, but basically white people in general. He started pushing an agenda via the Nation of Islam that white people were, quote, devils, that blacks were superior to whites, and that the demise of the white race was imminent. He was critical of the civil rights movement, even labeling Dr. King Jr. a chump, and he called Dr. King's 1963 March on Washington the farce on Washington. Now, do I like this element of his messages? Fuck no. Of course I don't. I don't like racism in any form. I don't like it when it's white against black, and I don't like it when it's black on white. But while I don't condone Malcolm X's, racist rhetoric, I do have more sympathy for him than I do, for some like KKK leader, for example. Because I feel like people are like, well, it's not okay for them to say it. Why is it okay here? Not okay for either person to say that, I don't think. But when you're the victim of consistent racial abuse, and then you in turn are like, well, fuck those people, I have more sympathy for you than when you are on the team or on the side of consistent perpetration of racial abuse. Right? Malcolm's rage came from being a member of a race that truly was continually oppressed and victimized by the race that was in political and cultural power in the nation he was born and raised in. I mean, he's different associations, the death of his father, witnessing all these beatings. It makes more sense to me, I guess, is what I'm saying. Doesn't make it more right at the end of the day, but it makes it, to me, more understandable. It was the same rage that also would create the Black Panthers. It was the issue of police brutality, again, that led to their creation. And law enforcement time suckers, you know that I love you. I think the overwhelming majority of you are great goddamn citizens. You know that how much respect I have for you for putting your lives on the line to keep the public safe day after day after day. And I'm guessing you also know that some of your coworkers, or at least some of your professional predecessors, either are or in past times were sadistic racist fucks. Like, some people crave a position of authority to serve and protect, others abuse it. Right? That's just, I feel like that is just, I would like to think common sense. The world has always had those meat sacks, always will. And Malcolm X and the Black Panthers after him weren't just talking out of their asses when they complained about police brutality. And that wasn't a callback to my silly fart joke either. Hard to find stats specifically on incidents of police brutality in the 1950s and 1960s that compare police violence towards blacks against violence of any other race, including whites. But I did find some interesting info that at least illustrates a pervasive culture of prejudice that no job sector, including law enforcement, would be immune to. In 1929, the Illinois Association for Criminal Justice published the Illinois Crime Survey, conducted between 1927 and 1928. The survey sought to analyze causes of high crime rates in Chicago and Cook County, especially among criminals associated with Al Capone. But the survey also provided some unexpected data. Although African Americans made up just 5% of the area's population at the time, they constituted 30% of the victims of police killings. You don't get a number like that without a lot of racism. I mean, clearly, many of the police at that time were far more likely to kill you if you were black than if you were white. Using 2015 data, racial minorities made up about 37.4% of the general population in the U.S. and 46.6% of armed and unarmed killings by police. They made up 62.7% of unarmed people killed by police. Wow. An analysis of FBI data found that black people accounted for 31% of police killing victims in 2012, even though they make up just 13% of the U.S. population. Although the data is incomplete because it's based on voluntary reports from police agencies around the country, it highlights the vast disparities in how some police were still using force as recently as 2012. A 2011 to 2014 study by a University of California Davis professor found, quote, evidence of a significant bias in the killing of unarmed black Americans relative to unarmed white Americans, in that the probability of being black, unarmed, and shot by police is roughly 3.49, so 3.5 times the probability of being white, unarmed, and shot by police on average. I mean, again, that's a huge difference. That's not like a slight statistical anomaly. 3.5 times more likely. 2010 New York Governor's Task Force study examining police on police shootings found even black and Latino police officers face a greater risk of being killed by other police. In cases of mistaken identity, 9 out of 10 of off-duty police officers killed by other officers in the U.S. since 1982 have either been black or Latino. 9 out of 10. Again, clearly, when white people say don't shoot, they're far more likely to be listened to than black people. 2013-2014 Stanford study of police practices in Oakland, California, where the Black Panthers would really get going as a movement, found that officers were disproportionately handcuffing blacks. 2,890 African Americans were handcuffed but not arrested in a 13-month period, compared to only 193 white people. When Oakland officers pulled over a vehicle but didn't arrest anyone, 72 white people were handcuffed, compared to nearly 1,500 African Americans. I mean, that's an astronomical disparity. And if racial profiling is still occurring now, which the stats consistently show is happening, God, it's safe to assume the shit was way worse in the 1950s and 60s. So much worse in the days before social media, YouTube, and everyone having a video camera on their phone kept everybody a little more honest. Martin Luther King Jr., wasn't leading marches and leading sit-ins because everything was fine and dandy. Malcolm X wasn't talking about white devils because of the consistent love and respect coming his way from white people. And then in 1965, the year before our timeline was founded, or will begin, two major incidents led to the formation of the Black Panther Party. One was the assassination of Malcolm X in February of 1965, and the other was the Watts riots in August of that year. On the evening of Wednesday, August 11th, 1965, 21-year-old Marquette Fry, an African-American man driving his mother's 1955 Buick, pulled over by California Highway Patrol motorcycle officer Lee Minikis for alleged reckless driving in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles. After administering a field sobriety test, Minikis placed Fry under arrest, radioed for his vehicle to be impounded. Marquette's brother Ronald, a passenger in the vehicle, walked to their nearby house, bringing their mother, Rena Price, back with him to the scene of the arrest. When Rena Price arrived on the scene, she scolded Fry about drinking and driving, as he recalled years later in a 1985 interview with the Orlando Sentinel. And then the situation escalated quickly. Somebody shoved Price, Fry was struck, Price jumped an officer, and another officer pulled out a shotgun, and shit got crazy. Backup police officers attempted to arrest Fry by using physical force to subdue him. After community members reported that police had roughed up Fry and kicked a pregnant woman, angry mobs quickly formed. As the situation intensified, growing crowds of local residents watching the exchange began yelling and throwing objects at the police officers. They'd had enough, and a riot broke out. Police came to the scene to break up the crowd several times that night, but were attacked when people threw rocks and chunks of concrete at them. A 46-square-mile swath of Los Angeles was transformed into an active combat zone for 6 days. Nearly 4,000 members of the California National Guard would end up getting called in to suppress rioting that resulted in 34 deaths, 272 buildings being damaged or burned, 192 businesses and homes looted, 267 businesses completely destroyed. Overall, $40 million worth of damage occurred, which would be $320 million in 2018 dollars. And while the riots ended, the feelings of rage consuming many Black Americans did not. Black youth are hearing Malcolm X, or were hearing before he was assassinated, tell them that if white America won't leave them alone, they'll just have to burn the nation to the fucking ground to rebuild it. Malcolm X adamantly believed in bearing arms. He wasn't down with Dr. King's let's hold hands and pray about this shit. He wanted a revolution. April 3rd, 1964, he'd actually given a speech in which he encouraged African Americans to use their right to vote and threatened the government with an armed response if African Americans did not receive full voting equality. In the speech, he stated, it's either the ballot or the bullet. And that was one of the slogans that would later be adopted by the Black Panthers. In his Message to Grassroots speech delivered in 1963, Malcolm X explained that armed self-defense among African Americans was not only necessary, but also morally justifiable, citing the American Revolution, the French Revolution, Russian Revolution. He claimed all involved huge losses of life and outlined a belief that a revolution that does not involve bloodshed is impossible. He said, look at the American Revolution in 1776. That revolution was for what? For land. Why did they want land? Independence. How was it carried out? Bloodshed. The French Revolution, what was it based on? The landless against the landlord. What was it for? Land. How did they get it? Bloodshed. Was no love lost? Was no compromise? Was no negotiation? The Russian Revolution, what was it based on? Land, the landless against the landlord. How did they bring it about? Bloodshed. You haven't got a revolution that doesn't involve bloodshed. As long as the white man sent you to Korea, you bled. He sent you to Germany, you bled. He sent you to the South Pacific to fight the Japanese, you bled. But when it comes to seeing your own churches being bombed and little black girls murdered, you haven't got any blood. How are you going to be nonviolent in Mississippi as violent as you were in Korea? If it is wrong to be violent defending black women and black children and black babies and black men, then it is wrong for America to draft us and make us violent abroad in defense of her. And if it is right for America to draft us and teach us how to be violent in defense of her, then it is right for you and me to do whatever is necessary to defend our own people right here in this country. That's powerful shit. A lot of military references in that talk, you know. Opposition to the growing conflict in Vietnam also was leading to the formation of the Black Panthers. Even before the U.S. ever really escalated the Vietnam conflict, young American men were being drafted. Between 1954 and 1964, peacetime drafts, from the end of the Korean War until the main escalation in Vietnam, the peacetime drafts inducted more than 1.4 million American men, on average of more than 120,000 per year. Many Panther leaders would preach a message of Why should we fight and die for a nation that doesn't fight for us? Right? A nation whose police profile, beat, and kill us. A nation that forces many of us to live in ghettos where jobs are scarce, where the schools our children go to are broken down and dangerous, where we can't make enough money to properly feed our children, where our children, in addition to not having proper nutritional and educational access, also don't have the proper access to hope for a better life. Now that the context has been laid down and backed up with some numbers never gathered from wackadoodle. This will trick Whitey. Now let us jump into the Panthers with today's Timesuck timeline after a word from another sponsor of today. Timesuck is brought to you once again by the A-Hole Air Banjo. The A-Hole Air Banjo Academy. The A-Hole Air Banjo Academy's latest course, Banjo Power, Plucking It to the Man. You can sign up today. You don't always have to grab the air guitar when you're laying down some bomb tracks to fuel a revolution. Rage Against the Machine, actually perfect for air banjo. Bang, tank, patang, pank, patang, tang, tank, patang, pank, patang, tatong, tank, patang, pank, tatang, patang, pang, killing in the name of dang, 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 dang. Fucking hear that? It's perfect. Some of those who work forces are the same that burn crosses. Oh, I don't know, actually, not that part. Or how about Aretha Franklin, respect banjo backup to get you in the mood to take no shit from anyone. It's perfect. Bang, dang. Bang, dang. Bang, dang. You want to overdo it. Dang, dang. What you want? Dang, dang, dang. Dang, dang, dang. Dang, bang, dang. Dang, dang, dang. Bang, bang, bang. Dang, 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 dang. Probably overdoing it there. Dang, 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 dang. You get it? You get it. And I'm done now. I'm done again. It's fucking heavy. I have to break it up here and there. Oh. Am I ever going to get tired of air banjo? I hope not. Timesuck is actually brought to you today by Lisa. Maybe people would have been nicer to each other back in the 50s and 60s if all meat sacks were sleeping better. People get grouchy when they don't get enough sleep. I do. Now, the only reason I don't get good sleep is because sometimes I don't go to sleep when I should. When I do go to sleep, when I actually get in the bed, I get great sleep because I'm on a Lisa mattress. A quality night's sleep helps you recover from distractions faster, prevents burnout, make better decisions, improve your memory, make fewer mistakes. It's not marketing, it's science. More sleep also helps you be less of a dick. That's not marketing or science. It's just my opinion, but I do believe it to be true. So don't be a dick. Sleep on a Lisa. That could be a slogan. If Lisa execs want to use it, I'll sign away my rights right now. I'll score it with the air banjo. If anybody from Lisa wants to have that in the background, bang, 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 for free. I'm just throwing that out there. Lisa builds a great mattress. They're a great company. Through their 110 program, they donate one mattress for every 10 they sell. That's more than 32,000 mattresses donated now through over 1,000 nonprofits and counting. And the all-foam Lisa mattress is new and improved, featuring cooling LSA 200 foam for enhanced pressure relief for side sleepers. Just yesterday, I was snuggled up on my Lisa with my wife, Lindsay, Queen of Suck, and Ginger Bell and Penny Pooper. And I have to say, the dogs, they do seem to love it. They refuse to move off the bed. It's the only time I've ever heard either one of those little furry assholes growl at me. And I get it. They don't want to get kicked off of Lisa. And I don't get up to do anything about it because I'm also very comfortable and cozy and I don't want to move. I'm too snugged up. So don't miss getting snugged up. Get some snug. Don't miss Lisa's President's Day sale. This is a new kick-ass Lisa deal. Get 15% off any mattress for a limited time at lisa.com/timesuck when you use the promo code timesuck. That's LEESA.com/timesuck, promo code timesuck. Link in the episode description. Lisa button in the Timesuck app. Black Panther timeline right now.
Strap on those boots, soldier. We're marching down a Timesuck timeline.
On October 22nd, 1966, Oakland community organizer Bobby Seale and ex-con turned law student Huey Newton formed the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, a revolutionary political organization on Seale's 30th birthday. Huey Newton was only 24. Originally, there were just 6 members. There was Elbert Big Man Howard, Huey Newton, the defense minister, Sherman Forte, Bobby Seale, the chairman, Reggie Forte, and little Bobby Hutton, the treasurer. The concept of a Black Panther Party didn't originate in Oakland. It's just where it took hold. A group similar in mission statement, but different in name, that just barely preceded the Panthers, was the SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that formed in Lowndes County, Alabama in early 1966. Hopefully I'm saying Lowndes correct. That's a word I don't feel super confident about. The earliest organization, actually called the Black Panther Party, started in April of 1966, the New York Black Panther Party, but it was almost immediately infiltrated and placed under law enforcement surveillance and dissolved completely within a year. Actually, many Panther organizations formed around the country in 1966, but none really thrived like the Oakland chapter. Huey Newton was born in Monroe, Louisiana, and Huey, again, the co-founder, born to an impoverished family of sharecroppers. His family moved to Oakland in 1945 when he was just 3 years old. As a teenager, he was arrested several times for criminal offenses, including gun possession, vandalism at age 14. Growing up in Oakland, Newton said that he was made to feel ashamed of being black. Years later, in his autobiography, Revolutionary Suicide, he wrote, "During those long years in Oakland public schools, I did not have one teacher who taught me anything relevant to my own life or experience. Not one instructor ever awoke in me a desire to learn more or to question or to explore the worlds of literature, science, and history. All they did was try to rob me of the sense of my own uniqueness and worth, and in that process nearly killed my urge to inquire. If only Huey had the cult of the curious to turn to. Hail Nimrod! Yeah, yeah, yeah! Got fired up for a second there. Huey graduated from Oakland Technical High School in 1959 despite not knowing how to read. Sounds like that high school was even easier than Salmon River High School, the place I graduated from in Riggins, Idaho. I would not be surprised if a few of my former classmates also graduated not knowing how to read. Despite being illiterate, Newton was no dummy. He taught himself how to read before attending Merritt College in Oakland and then got into the San Francisco School of Law where he met Bobby Seale. Years after the dissolution of the Panthers in 1980, he'd received a PhD in social philosophy from the University of California at Santa Cruz. His dissertation was titled War Against the Panthers, a study of repression in America. The other co-founder, Robert Bobby Seale, was born in Liberty, Texas, son of a carpenter and a homemaker. When he was 8, his family moved to Oakland. Seale went to Berkeley High School, dropped out, joined the U.S. Air Force. He was dishonorably discharged a few years later for fighting with the commanding officer. Feisty dude. After leaving the Air Force, he worked as a sheet metal mechanic for various aerospace plants while studying for his high school diploma at night. Another guy who's no dummy, he'd later say, I worked in every major aircraft plant and aircraft corporation, even those with government contracts. I was a top-flight sheet metal mechanic. After earning his high school diploma, Seale attended Merritt Community College, where he studied engineering and politics until 1962. In 1962, he first heard Malcolm X speak. He was so inspired, he joined the Afro-American Association, AAA, a group on the campus devoted to advocating black separatism, and lost interest in engineering. Through the AAA group, Seale met Huey Newton. Every time I say Huey's name, by the way, I immediately think of Huey Lewis in the Noose. It's just every single time I say Huey, I just right away in my head, I want a new drug, want a woman me sick, bam, 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 want a woman me crash my car, make me feel 3 feet thick. Fucking Huey Lewis. Anyway, in June of 1966, Seale began working at the North Oakland Neighborhood Anti-Poverty Center in their summer youth program teaching Black American history and an ethic of responsibility toward other black people living in your black community. He and Newton met Bobby Hutton, one of the original 6, and Seale would describe the Panthers as an organization that represents black people, and many white radicals relate to this and understand that the Black Panther Party is a righteous revolutionary front against this racist, decadent, capitalistic system. In addition to being influenced by the teachings of Malcolm X, who had once declared himself a communist in a letter to President Truman opposing U.S. involvement in the Korean War, the Black Panthers also heavily influenced by communist and socialist teachings. The FBI would declare them a communist organization. Like Malcolm X, the Panthers were influenced by the philosophies of Fidel Castro, Karl Marx, and others. They believed in a link between racism and the capitalist system. Huey Newton, and every single time, Huey Lewis, I want a new drug. Huey Newton, in particular, identified as a Marxist-Leninist, Lenin being, of course, the Russian revolutionary who served as the head of Soviet Russia from 1917 to 1924, who was heavily influenced by Pootie and Juju. Put it in your lunchbox, Shirley. Do a little Pootie. Learn about all that in the Timesuck if you're confused. Despite sharing similarities with other African American cultural nationalist organizations, such as the Universal Negro Improvement Association and Malcolm X's Nation of Islam, to which the Panthers were commonly compared, the Panthers immediately sought to set themselves apart from these other groups. Although all of these black-centric groups shared certain philosophical positions and tactical features, the Black Panther Party differed on a number of basic points. For example, whereas African American cultural nationalists generally regarded all white people as oppressors, the whole white devil talk of Malcolm X, initially, at least, the Black Panther Party distinguished between racist and non-racist whites and allied themselves with progressive members of the latter group. You watch videos of old Black Panther demonstrations, early ones, and you typically see a fair amount of white supporters. And whereas other black nationalists generally viewed all African Americans as oppressed, the Black Panther Party believed that black capitalists and black elites could and typically did exploit and oppress other black people, especially the working class. The Black Panthers were also more militant than other black nationalist groups. Look at pictures, and they're often dressed up like soldiers in a revolution, armed soldiers. To really understand what the Panthers were about, you have to get familiar with their 10-point program, which was a mission statement written by Huey Newton shortly before the group even officially formed on October 15th, 1966. Number one, we want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our black community. We believe that black people will not be free until we are able to determine our destiny. Number two, we want full employment for our people. We believe that the federal government is responsible and obligated to give every man employment or a guaranteed income. We believe that if the white American businessman will not give full employment, then the means of production should be taken from the businessman and placed in the community so that the people of the community can organize and employ all of its people and give a high standard of living. I do understand the desire to have more equality here, I mean, of course, but man, not through communism. It's amazing how many people were really into communism back then. It was just a different era. I mean, communism was new and exciting to numerous young liberals in the 1960s. Those who have survived until today, though, I'm guessing the overwhelming majority have a very different opinion of communism now. Capitalism has its evils, for sure, but it's proven to provide a far better quality of life than communism, right? Look at the human rights violations in North Korea, communist Russia, Cuba, China, etc. You know, innovative entrepreneurial capitalism fuels new technology, increases our standard of living. You don't see North Korea kicking out the latest, greatest computers, automobiles, medical technology, etc. No. And I don't have time in this suck to go into great detail about the differences between communism and capitalism here to properly illustrate how much better capitalism is. But communism, time and time again, failed to improve the human condition. Fuck communism. Bojangles growls every time he hears that word. If this country ever shifts towards actual communism, I shit you not, I will leave. I will bounce out to any capitalist nation that will take me. I don't mind some socialism. We do have that now already. It's called Medicaid, or Medicare, or Social Security. But communism, no. I do understand, though, when it seems like you and your family and friends never get to be the factory owners like ever, then fuck yeah, let's take it. Let's give that shit to the people, you know? Very Rage Against the Machine. Bang, tang, 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 tang. Can you imagine there's a revolution going on? Like people are like, fuck, fight the power with that beat. Fight the power. And then just one dude with the banjo. Tang, 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 tang. They're like, Doug, enough with the goddamn banjo. You're killing the whole vibe. But I'm playing the same notes as everyone else. I'm in the same spirit. Pang, tang, pang, tang, tang. Come on, it's how I contribute to the... No, Doug. Get a fucking bass guitar or shut up. Oh, all right. What if I do it quiet? Tang, 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 tang. Anyways, back to the 10-point program. Number 3, want to end the robbery by the capitalists of our black community. We believe that this racist government has robbed us, and now we are demanding the overdue debt of 40 acres and 2 mules. 40 acres and 2 mules were promised 100 years ago as restitution for slave labor and the mass murder of black people. We will accept the payment in currency, which will be distributed to many communities. The Germans are now aiding the Jews in Israel for the genocide of the Jewish people. The Germans murdered 6 million Jews. The American racists have taken part in the slaughter of over 50 million black people. Therefore, we feel that this is a modest demand that we make. Now, restitution, this is something I've heard about many, many years. I've often heard of this 40 acres and 2 mules promise, but I've never looked into it until this week. So glad the suck gave me an excuse to do so. Did the U.S. government promise to give 40 acres and 2 mules to freed slaves following the Civil War? The short answer is no, it actually did not. But hear me out. The notion does have historical origins. When a Union army led by General William Tecumseh Sherman marched through Georgia in late 1864, thousands of newly freed black citizens followed along. Until the arrival of federal troops, they had been slaves on plantations in that region. Sherman's army took the city of Savannah, Georgia, just before Christmas 1864. While in Savannah, Sherman attended a meeting organized in January 1865 by Edwin Stanton, President Lincoln's Secretary of War. A number of local black ministers, most of whom had just recently lived as slaves, expressed the desires of the local black population. According to a letter General Sherman wrote a year later, Secretary Stanton concluded that if given land, the freed slaves could take care of themselves. And as land belonging to those who rose up in rebellion against the federal government had been declared abandoned by a recent act of Congress, there was land to distribute. Following the meeting, Sherman drafted an order, General Sherman, which was officially designated as Special Field Orders Number 15. In this document, dated January 16, 1865, Sherman ordered that the abandoned rice plantations from the sea to 30 miles inland would be, quote, reserved and set apart for the settlement of the freed slaves in the region. Okay, so land was promised to freed slaves. However, it was promised by a general in the army who did not have the authority to make that promise. Right? It was not a bill passed through Congress and the Senate and then signed into law by the president. According to Sherman's order, each family shall have a plot of not more than 40 acres of tillable ground. At the time, it was generally accepted that 40 acres of land was the optimal size for a family farm. General Rufus Saxton was put in charge of administering the land along the Georgia coast. While Sherman's order stated each family shall have a plot of no more than 40 acres of tillable ground, there was no specific mention of farm animals, no 2 mules. However, General Saxton did apparently provide surplus U.S. Army mules to some of the families granted land. And that's where the mule part of the story comes into play. And a lot of people heard about Sherman's order because it got a lot of national press. The New York Times on January 29, 1865, printed the entire text on the front page under the headline, General Sherman's Order Providing Homes for the Freed Negroes. 3 months after Sherman issued his Field Orders Number 15, the U.S. Congress created the Freedmen's Bureau for the purpose of ensuring the welfare of millions of slaves being freed by the war. We talked about this bureau in the KKK suck. One initial task of the Freedmen's Bureau was the management of lands confiscated from those who had rebelled against the U.S. The intent of Congress, led by radical Republicans, was to break up the plantations and redistribute the lands so former slaves could have their own small farms. But then Lincoln was killed. Everything changed. Andrew Johnson became president in April 1865, and Andrew Johnson was kind of a douchebag. And Johnson, on May 28, 1865, issued a proclamation of pardon and amnesty to citizens in the South who would take an oath of allegiance. As part of the pardon process, lands confiscated from these people during the war would now be returned to them. So while the radical Republicans had fully intended for there to be a massive redistribution of land from former slave owners to former slaves under the Reconstruction, and land was actually, in fact, given to many former slaves, Johnson's policy came in and fucked everything up. Approximately 40,000 former slaves received grants of land under Sherman's order, and then all of that was taken away by Andrew Johnson. So while there was no law or presidential promise of 40 acres and 2 mules, there was an attempt at restitution that was then revoked. Do I think that some form of restitution should be given to the descendants of slaves? Yes, but I don't know what it should look like. It's so complicated. It would be easy to say, oh, fuck yeah, fucking money, land, yeah, everything, whatever's fair, make it happen. But that's not how life works. Does the U.S. government even have the ability to pay out the money that would be required? And if the descendants of slaves should get money, what about American Indians? What should they get? Who pays for all that now? Taxpayers? What about taxpayers whose ancestors weren't even in this country prior to 1865? Is that fair? The more you think about it, the more complex it gets. Aren't there any other groups of Americans who aren't African American also trapped in cycles of multi-generational socioeconomic disadvantages? Who else should be given some money? It's fucking tricky. Which is why it should be looked into and not ignored. People smarter than me should take some time to actually dig into this issue. And people tried, and unfortunately it didn't go anywhere. Every year between 1989 and 2017, Representative John Conyers from Michigan, Democrat, introduced the Commission to Study Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act. As the name indicates, H.R. 40 did not require reparations. It was just to look into it, to study it. It just called for the comprehensive research into the nature and financial impact of African enslavement, as well as the ills inflicted on black people during the Jim Crow era. Only then can remedies be considered or suggested. And every year, the bill stalled. Democrats and Republicans, everybody shot it down. Every year, every single year for 19 years. It's fucking embarrassing. What about targeted education and job training programs for the descendants of slaves whose families have been trapped in cycles of poverty for over 150 years? Can we at least look into that? I think shame on us for not ever, actually considering it. Back to the 10 points now. Number 4, we want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings. We believe that if white landlords will not give decent housing to our black community, then the housing and the land should be made into cooperatives so that our community, when government aid or with government aid, can build and make decent housing for its people. Again, I don't like the communist angle, but decent and affordable housing should absolutely be made available to everybody. We want education. Number 5, we want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want education that teaches us our true history and our role in the present day society. We believe in an educational system that will give our people a knowledge of self. If a man does not have knowledge of himself and his position in society and the world, then he has little chance to relate to anything else. Couldn't agree more. The curriculum taught to kids in school seems to be way more diverse now than it was when I was a kid, based on what I've seen with Kyler Monroe. So I feel like things are moving in a good direction. That's good. Hail Nimrod. That's good. When I was a kid, I didn't learn shit in school about Africa or the Middle East or really anything other than just information filtered through a Judeo-Christian kind of Western European lens. I feel like the best way to be racist and prejudiced is to only look at the world through your little bubble, right? Your little cultural and racial point of view. Travel to enough other nations, read enough foreign literature, and you will realize, if you keep an open mind, that we're all pretty much the same. When you get down to the core of it, we're all involved in the same struggle. We got different ideologies, different religious and political notions, but deep down, everybody pretty much wants the same shit. Number 6, we want all black men to be exempt from military service. We believe that black people should not be forced to fight in the military service to defend a racist government that does not protect us. We will not fight and kill other people of color in the world who, like black people, are being victimized by the white racist government of America. We will protect ourselves from the force and violence of the racist police and the racist military by whatever means necessary. There's a little Malcolm X, by whatever means necessary. I understand the logic here, but maybe this one shouldn't have been written down. This reads as a declaration of war. And when you're fighting a nation with too many soldiers and weapons for you to ever even hope to defeat them, maybe just kind of keep that quiet. Maybe have number 6 be discussed internally, secretly, never written down if you don't want to get on the FBI's kind of watch list. Like if I ever want to start a revolution, it's gonna be like Fight Club, right? First rule of overthrowing the government is to not fucking talk about overthrowing the government, which I do realize creates some organizational problems. Number 7, we want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of black people. We believe we can end police brutality in our black community by organizing black self-defense groups that are dedicated to defending our black community from racist police suppression and brutality. The Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States gives a right to bear arms. We therefore believe that all black people should arm themselves for self-defense. Yeah, I agree. The main point of having an armed citizenry is to prevent your government from becoming tyrannical and abusing you. I got a lot of emails after my gun control suck a while back letting me know that despite our military having superior weaponry, an armed populace still absolutely helps keep our government in check through the threat of insurgency. We want number 8, we want freedom for all black men held in federal, state, county, and city prisons and jails. We believe that all black people should be released from their many jails and prisons because they have not received a fair and impartial trial. May want to change the wording on this one. How about we believe that all black inmates should have their cases reviewed by, fair juries, mixed juries. While many black inmates have been wrongly incarcerated, not all black inmates were in jail because they were the victim of racism. Many were there because they broke laws. But again, I understand where this is coming from. I understand the sentiment. We want, number 9, we want all black people to be able to take any and all property from the descendants of slave owners effective now. This includes physical property, financial property, intellectual property, and sexual property. Your bodies will be ours, you white devil motherfuckers. That's intense, and that's not number 9. That'd be too much. That would be can't launch a revolution when you're that aggressive right off the rip. No, number 9. I actually confused myself. I wrote that down in my notes and then forgot I had written down a lie, and I was like, what the fuck? How did they think they would fucking get away with that? You can't just take people's land right now. What the fuck? Oh yeah, I made that up. I was the one who fucking made up that lie. Number 9 said, we want all black people when brought to trial to be tried in a court by a jury of their peer group or people from their black communities, as defined by the Constitution of the United States. We believe that the court should follow the United States Constitution so that black people will receive fair trials. The 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution gives a man a right to be tried by his peer group. A peer is a person from a similar economic, social, religious, geographical, environmental, historical, and racial background. To do this, the court will be forced to select a jury from the black community from which the black defendant came. We have been and are being tried by all white juries that have no understanding of the average reasoning man of the black community. I do love that one. All white juries deciding black trials, especially during the racist 1960s, that's pretty fucked up. Should not have happened. And finally, number 10, we want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect of the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles as and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpation, sorry, that word eludes me right now. Pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Whew, that's a mouthful. That's a lot. That's a lot of info. I love it. I mean, they never had a chance to overthrow the U.S. government, but I love the spirit of this message. It's like, yeah, when the government turns and it isn't serving the people, time to overthrow the government. I love America. And loving it should include wanting to destroy it if it ever loses its way, right? The only reason America was started was to be able to pursue the American dream, be able to work your way into owning a home, sending your kids to college, chasing a nice retirement for yourself, and an inheritance for future generations. And for Huey, Bobby, people living in their neighborhoods, this is damn near impossible. If I was him, I would have felt the same rage. Now imagine, I would probably fucking hated white people. Would have wanted to burn this country to the ground. And if we ever become as racist and hateful as we used to be, if we ever stop evolving towards more and more acceptance for people of different sexual preferences, skin colors, cultural affiliations, religious or non-religious belief systems, gender identities, etc., if we become more and more intolerant as opposed to tolerant, then I hope we do burn this motherfucker to the ground and start over. Let's not make America great again. Let's make it great for everyone for the first fucking time. It's been great before, but only selectively. Never great for everyone. That's why I've always hated that slogan. Wasn't great for women when workplace sexual harassment and date rape was basically a cultural norm. Wasn't great for homosexuals when they were given the Matthew Shepard treatment time and time again. Wasn't great for Asians when they were being run out of the fucking towns and thrown into shallow graves while they built railroads and worked mines. It wasn't fucking great for inner city black Americans when they were so scared of police they felt they needed to arm themselves and follow the police. And if you want to read politics into this rant, that's on you. It's not there for me. If wanting equality for everyone who isn't actively hurting others with their choices isn't part of your moral compass, if that offends you somehow politically, then you're no member of the cult of curious. You're not on Team Meat Sack. Get in Nimrod's butthole. Get in there. It's where apparently you belong. Okay, now back to the show. Let's talk about following the police, what I was referencing there, after a word from today's final sponsor. Before we discuss other areas outside of Europe, what am I talking about? Sorry, a word from today's final sponsor. I lost my mind for a second there. Went to the wrong notes. Today's Timesuck is brought to you by the Great Courses Plus. I am on a lifelong quest to learn as much as I can about the past and the world around me. And the Great Courses Plus is an invaluable tool in this regard. Well, with the Great Courses Plus, you get unlimited access to in-depth, insightful information on virtually any topic. This streaming service has thousands of lectures to explore on topics like world history, archaeology, astronomy, civil rights, art and literature, even cooking or learning a new language. And they're all presented by top-notch experts who are so passionate about what they teach. You can watch or listen entirely on your schedule from anywhere. If you heard last week's Suck, you know that I've been enjoying the course, The History of Ancient Egypt. Egyptologist Bob Breer examines the 3 periods of ancient Egypt, including Sneferu, the first pyramids, the mysterious reign of Queen Hatshepsut, the murder of King Tut. I like King Tut. Easy Egyptian name. Even talks about how to read hieroglyphics. Lecture 44, still my favorite, the Middle Ptolemies, the decline. Dr. Bob talks about one of the Ptolemy rulers fleeing to Cyprus when the people revolted against him. His wife stayed behind to rule in his place. That pissed him off. So he let her know that he was not happy by having their son killed, dismembered, and then having the scattered parts of their son sent to her on her birthday. Surprise! Ha ha! You never saw that coming, do you? That is so messed up. That's so messed up. It might even, make Ed Kemper be like, Father, you've gone too far, Father. You really need to get your zapples under control. So learn more about the Ptolemies. So much more. To help you get started, the Great Courses Plus is offering a free trial with unlimited access to learn about anything. To get this great offer, sign up through thegreatcoursesplus.com/timesuck. That's thegreatcoursesplus.com/timesuck. Link in the episode description. Push the Great Courses button in the Timesuck app. Push it real good. That was weird. Now back to the first organized activities of the Black Panthers. Late 1966. Within a few months of organizing, the Black Panther Party began organizing police patrols, started doing what they called cop watching. Open carry laws, this is fascinating to me. Open carry laws of the 1960s allowed citizens to openly carry loaded weapons in hand, basically wherever they pleased. As long as you didn't point at somebody, openly threaten them with it. You could just walk right into Macy's. You could walk in with a loaded shotgun, semi-automatic military-style rifle, safety off. Gotta say, I'm a gun owner, and I am so glad you can't do that shit now. I'm so glad you just can't walk into a bar with a loaded rifle in hand. Carrying a firearm directly in your hands now, particularly in a firing position or combat stance, is known as brandishing a firearm. And that's a crime even where I live in Idaho, which is a very permissive open carry state. Actually, the current law in Idaho, Section 18, 3303 reads, exhibition or use of a deadly weapon. Every person who not in necessary self-defense in the presence of two or more persons draws or exhibits any deadly weapon in a rude, angry, and threatening manner, or who, in any manner, unlawfully uses the same in any fight or quarrel, is guilty of a misdemeanor. Misdemeanor? What? That's pretty crazy. That if I'm interpreting this law correctly, I could pull out a loaded gun at Denny's here in Coeur d'Alene. I could point at the ceiling. Just as long as I'm not pointing at somebody, I could just kind of casually wave it around, just yell stuff like, I'm fucking tired of waiting for my pancakes! Just get my goddamn pancakes going! Coffee water's cold! Warm up my coffee water! Give me my pancakes! And somebody could be like, sir, put the gun away. You bring my fucking pancakes! I'll stop waving my gun around as soon as I can use the gun hand to grab some tasty-ass butter and syrup and shovel it into my fucking gullet! Give my pancakes! I'm getting hangry! After all that, I could be arrested and charged with a misdemeanor. That's mind-blowing. Mr. Cummins, the court finds you guilty of carrying your weapon in a rude, threatening manner. I didn't threaten anyone, Your Honor. I didn't threaten shit. And nonetheless, it is most definitely rude to wave your gun around at Denny's and demand pancakes with gratuitous and unnecessary profanity. The court hereby orders you to pay at your convenience a $200 fine. I should do it. Probably get shot if I did it. Also, it wasn't illegal to follow the police and carry whatever weapons they pleased. So the Black Panthers did exactly that. They would follow the police while other officers would follow them. They had enough of police brutality and were ready to protect their neighborhood again by any means necessary. One of their slogans they'd taken from Malcolm X. If confronted, members would cite laws that proved they'd done nothing wrong and would threaten to take court action if the police violated their constitutional rights. The Black Panthers were huge gun right advocates. They walked around rifles in hand quite often. The aggressive means in which they yielded their right to carry would actually lead to California now having some of the toughest gun control laws in the nation. That all got started with the Black Panthers. How nervous would it make you, though, if you were an Oakland police officer, right? Just on patrol? Just, hey, Greg, that guy was doing about 70 in a 35. Don't you think we should maybe pull him over? Hey, Chad, do you see those guys in the car holding shotguns and 357 sitting about a block behind us? Oh, yeah, I see those guys. That's why we're going to let that go. Oh, so we're just going to let everyone just get away with everything now? Hell no, Chad. As soon as we see some white dude do something, we are going to arrest the fuck out of him. Further adding to tensions with local police, the Black Panthers began casually referring to all law enforcement officers as pigs, chanting things loudly while armed like the revolution has come. It's time to pick up the gun off the pigs. Not great for, community police relations. January 1967, the Black Panther Party opens its first official headquarters in Oakland. In a storefront, publishes the first issue of the Black Panther Black Community News Service. In February of 67, membership numbers get a bump when the Black Panthers escort Malcolm X's widow through the Oakland airport, give them a little prestige. Public association between Malcolm's widow and the group gives them some revolutionary legitimacy. New Black Panther recruits are required to learn how to wield a weapon, learn how to clean and shoot guns, in addition to understanding their right to carry firearms and how to communicate that right to the police in California. Huey Newton puts his knowledge of the law on display when he and Seal are stopped by Oakland police officers in early 1967 in a vehicle filled with weapons. When questioned about the guns, Newton simply replied that the only thing he was obliged to do was give his identification, name, and address. At the request of the officer, Newton stepped out of the car, rifle in tow, and refused to explain why he and other Black Panthers were carrying weapons. As onlookers gathered, the police tried to disperse the crowd while Newton welcomed the crowd to gather and come over. He knew that under California law, bystanders could legally view an arrest as long as they didn't intrude. Since there were no violations for the police to charge the Black Panther members with, and a growing number of witnesses, they were able to leave the scene without any trouble from law enforcement. Man, that's some balls. That is some balls. And again, I love law enforcement officers. We need them to keep the general public safe. However, being a law enforcement officer doesn't give anyone the right to abuse the law. The best law enforcement officers are public servants, not billies. Billies. Not billies, you guys. You fucking hear it. Don't be a billy. What if I just kept going? Didn't clarify. Not billies. Don't, not Williams, not Billies, not Bills. So don't be a bill, put it on a bumper sticker, drive it around town. No, the best law enforcement officers, not bullies, abusing the very laws they're sworn to protect. Or sworn to uphold. Can I talk English? Not well. It's amazing that I can do a podcast. April 25th, 1967, the Black Panther Party newspaper features the bold-faced headline, "Why was Denzel Dowell killed?" To rally action over the death of a young man shot by police in northern Richmond, a small, impoverished, all-black town, or actually North Richmond, about 15 miles north of Oakland. In the early morning hours of April 1st, 1967, in North Richmond, Denzel Dowell lay dead in the street. The police said that Dowell, a 22-year-old construction worker, had been killed by a single shotgun blast to the back and head. They claimed he had been caught burglarizing a liquor store and when ordered to halt, failed to do so. But the coroner told a very different story. His body bore 6 different bullet holes, and there was reason to believe Dowell had been shot while surrendering with his hands raised high. His mother said, "I believe the police murdered my son." An all-white jury found that Dowell's death was justifiable homicide after just 30 minutes of deliberation. Many people in North Richmond did not agree. The newly formed Black Panthers did not agree and rushed to meet with the Dowell family and get more details about what happened. They started holding street corner rallies protesting his death as an act of police brutality, confronting officials, arguing that only by taking up arms could the Black community put a stop to police brutality. On one Sunday, the police came knocking on Mrs. Dowell's door while Newton was there, and when she opened the door, Huey later recalled, "A policeman pushed his way in asking questions. I grabbed my shotgun, stepped in front of her, telling him either to produce a search warrant or to leave. He stood for a minute, shocked, then ran out to his car and drove off." Again, this guy, no shortage of balls. Emboldened by this confrontation, Newton and Seal planned a rally, and a few days later, in the spring of 1967, the Panthers showed up armed and in uniform and closed off the street. Black leather jackets, black berets, many wearing sunglasses, all with guns in hand. I gotta say, looking pretty dope as fuck. Panthers had no shortage of swag. Word had spread, and almost 400 people of all ages came to the rally. Many working class and poor Black people from North Richmond showed up wanting to know how to get some measure of justice for Denzel. It's Denzil. Denzel Dowell, and in turn how to protect themselves and their community from further police attacks. People lined up both sides of the block. Some elderly residents brought lawn chairs to sit in while they listened. Some of the younger generation climbed on cars, grabbed some popcorn, watched the show. Some police cars arrived on the scene but chose to keep their distance. A Contra Costa County helicopter patrolled above. According to sheriff spokesman, the department took no other action because the Panthers broke no laws and, as required, displayed their weapons openly. Neighbors showed up with their own guns. One young woman who had been sitting in her car got out, held her up her M1 All right, and one rifle for everyone to see. The Panthers passed out applications to join their party, and over 300 people filled them out. According to FBI informant Earl Anthony, he had never seen black men command the respect of the people the way that Huey Newton and Bobby Seale did on that day. Crazy that the FBI was already watching. The FBI is going to become a very big part of this story here soon. This rally and the actions of the Panthers in general over the past few months scaring the shit out of the California government. Following the rally, Don Mulford quickly drafts the Mulford Act, a bill that would prohibit the carrying of loaded firearms in public. When Newton, Seale, and other Panthers caught wind of this new legislation being proposed, they quickly organized a protest. This might be my favorite part of the story. On May 2nd, 1967, Panther Chairman Bobby Seale led a group of 30 fully armed Black Panthers to the California State Capitol in Sacramento. Then Governor Ronald Reagan happened to be there. He was there that day, giving a speech. The news crews that were covering him quickly shifted to interviewing and filming the newly arrived Panthers. Before entering the Capitol building, Bobby Seale read a written statement on the Capitol steps right in front of Governor Reagan, saying the American people in general and the black people in particular must take careful note of the racist California legislature aimed at keeping the black people disarmed and powerless. Seale and 5 others ended up getting arrested during this protest, but not for gun charges. The group pled guilty to misdemeanor charges of disrupting legislation. It isn't saying there's pictures of them just inside the Capitol and just right in front, just openly holding shotguns and assault rifles. The following months, in June and July of 1967, there were massive race riots in cities like Cleveland, Newark, Chicago, and Detroit. The city of Newark, New Jersey, erupted in violence as black residents battled police following the beating of a black taxi driver, leaving 26 people dead. 26. The 1967 Detroit riots were among the most violent and destructive riots in U.S. history. By the time the bloodshed, burning, and looting ended after 5 days, 43 people were dead, 342 injured, nearly 1,400 buildings burned, some 7,000 National Guard and U.S. Army troops have been called into service. It all started, that one, with the raid of an illegal nightclub on 12th Street in Detroit, hotspot of inner-city nightlife, both legal and illegal. At the corner of 12th Street in Claremont, a man named William Scott operated a Blind Pig, which was an illegal after-hours club. It might be 12th Street in Claremont, actually. On weekends, out of the office of the United Community League for Civil Action, a civil rights group. The police vice squad often raided establishments like that on 12th Street, and at 3:35 a.m. on Sunday morning, July 23, they moved against Scott's club. On that warm, humid night, Scott was hosting a party for several veterans, including 2 servicemen recently returned from Vietnam, and the bar's patrons were reluctant to leave the air-conditioned club. Out in the street, a crowd began to gather as police waited for vehicles to take 85 patrons away. An hour passed before the last person was taken away, and by that time, 200 onlookers had lined the street, and then a bottle crashed into the street. The remaining police ignored it, but then more bottles were thrown, including one through the window of a patrol car. The police fled as a small riot then erupted. Within an hour, thousands of people had spilled out onto the street from nearby buildings. Looting began on 12th Street, and closed shops and businesses were ransacked. Around 6:30 a.m., the first fire broke out, and soon much of the street was ablaze. By mid-morning, every policeman and fireman in all of Detroit was called to duty. On 12th Street, officers fought to control the unruly mob. Firemen were attacked as they tried to battle the flames. Things just got worse from there. Yeah, a phenomena called white flight. White middle-class city residents fleeing urban centers to live in the suburbs in the 40s and 50s and 60s reduced the tax base in formerly prosperous downtown neighborhoods, creating urban blight, poverty, racial discord for the residents who remained, who were largely impoverished racial minorities. So poor, urban, underserviced black neighborhoods policed almost entirely by white law enforcement didn't make a good mix, didn't make for a good nonviolent mix. And then in late July of 67, the state capitol demonstration in May in California that had given the Panthers a tremendous amount of national exposure, increased membership levels, and ultimately didn't stop the bill from passing both the state assembly and Senate. Ironically, that bill got the full support of the NRA. In addition to repealing open carry laws in California, Mulford made it illegal to take firearms into the Capitol. On July 28th, the bill was signed into law by Governor Reagan, who later commented that he saw no reason why on the street today a citizen should be carrying loaded weapons. The Panthers can no longer now openly and legally carry loaded weapons while they follow police. So this puts a serious dent in the revolution. On October 28, 1967, the Oakland chapter of the Black Panther movement hits another snag when Panther Minister of Defense Huey Newton, co-founder, involved in a shootout with Oakland police after a traffic stop. Officer John Frey is killed. Newton is shot in the abdomen. Tracked to an Oakland hospital, he's arrested and charged with first-degree murder. New leaders step in to keep the movement going while Newton is incarcerated. Panther member Eldridge Cleaver, who joined the party after being released from prison on December 2nd, began the movement to free Huey, a struggle the Panthers would devote a considerable amount of attention to in the coming years, while the party would spread its roots further into the political spectrum, forming coalitions with various other revolutionary parties. Opinions on Eldridge Cleaver, he's an interesting character in this story. They vary wildly when you watch interviews of former Black Panthers. Essentially, most seem to think that he was either a visionary genius or a complete fucking maniac, or both. Cleaver was attracted to the Black Panthers because of their focus on armed struggle. Cleaver was an inmate of correctional institutions in California almost constantly from his junior high school days until 1966 for crimes ranging from possession of marijuana to rape to assault with intent to murder. While in prison, he also became a fan and a follower of the teachings of Malcolm X and Karl Marx. He also wrote essays that would be collected into Soul on Ice. The essays Cleaver documented the essays in the Soul on Ice book documented Cleaver's evolution into a radical Black liberationist, and it became a very highly influential book in the Black Power movement. The book was and remains fairly controversial. The central premise of the book is the trouble of identification as a Black soul, which has been colonized by an impressive white society that projects its brief, narrow vision of life as eternal truth. In the book, Cleaver admitted to raping Black girls as a practice run before seeking white women as prey, but claims that in jail he'd come to consider those acts as inhuman. Well, that's good. Jesus. Not sure you could earn that same forgiveness and be part of any kind of social justice movement today if you did that. Now, I'm sorry. Oh, whoa. Did you actually just say that you raped Black women as a practice run to learn how to more effectively rape white women? Did you just say that? Okay, you did. Okay, you did. Okay, I thought I heard fucking crazy talk. Your participation in the revolution is over now, effectively now. You can join possibly the rapists who promise not to rape anymore revolution, if that is a thing. Along with 10 other books, such as Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, Black Boy by Richard Wright, The Naked Ape by Desmond Morris, Soul on Ice would be part of a 1982 Supreme Court case when a Long Island, New York school district sought to remove these books from its libraries due to them being anti-American, anti-Christian, anti-Semitic, and just plain filthy. The Supreme Court ended up with a split ruling in this case. I do love the legal language of just plain filthy. I like how that was added there. And why would you like these books removed from your school libraries? They are just plain filthy, Your Honor. Define filthy. They're nasty as fuck, Your Honor. They're like vomit and shit thrown in the same bucket, swirled around, dumped on top of some rotten meat, then eaten, then vomited, then shit back into the same bucket for someone else to take their crack at it. They're filthy, Your Honor. They're just plain filthy. Eldridge was supportive of taking what you felt was yours to any means necessary. Again, that by any means necessary. One of his quotes was, "We shall have our manhood. We shall have it, or the earth will be leveled by our attempts to gain it." I feel like that's kind of a rapey quote. Might be reading into that now, but it seems kind of rapey for a rapist to be talking about taking manhood. And if you'll excuse me, I'm going to keep this recorded. I have to take a sip of water. This is the longest uninterrupted chunk between segments I think I've ever done on Timesuck. Wow, throat's getting dry. At one Black Power rally, Eldridge said about then California Governor Ronald Reagan, and I quote, this is one of the things that made some people think, like, I might be a little mentally unstable. He said, he's a punk, a sissy, and a coward, and I challenge him to a duel. I challenge him to a duel to the death, or until he says, Uncle Eldridge. And I give him his choice of weapons. He could use a gun, a knife, a baseball bat, or a marshmallow. I'll beat him to death with a marshmallow. That's how I feel about him. Not surprisingly, Reagan, not a huge Eldridge fan around this time. When Cleaver taught a class at UC Berkeley a few years later, when Reagan heard about it, he said, if Eldridge Cleaver is allowed to teach our children, they may come home one night and slit our throats. Ironically, there's a little footnote to this story. Ironically, Eldridge would then later become super conservative and openly endorse Reagan when Reagan ran for president. Eldridge would also later become a Mormon, a religion that is pretty conservative and pretty white. I gotta say, it feels like maybe one of the whiter religions. I guess people can change. Another new member of the party to take a leadership position once Newton was behind bars was Stokely Carmichael, the former chairman of that Alabama Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. and a nationally known proponent of black power. He becomes the party's prime minister in February 1968, and Stokely was arguably far less rapey than Eldridge, and by less I mean not at all. Nothing I could find there. Way more racist. Pretty racist. He was adamantly against allowing whites into the black liberation movement at any level. He felt that whites could not relate to the black experience, which I do agree with, and that they would have an intimidating effect on blacks, which I can't disagree with since I'm not black. However, you've just also, when you do this, given a huge middle finger to any white person who wants to help you, who wants your movement to succeed. And since there were about, 9 times as many white people in America as there were black people at that time, you have put a big fucking nail in your coffin, right? You've put a huge nail in the coffin of your own movement by doing that. At so many points in the suck, I feel so much empathy, as much as a white dude can, for this movement. Like, it must have been so nice for young black children to see such strong black role models who were not afraid of standing up to those who had oppressed them for so many generations. But when you go full us versus them mentality, when all white people become the problem, you lose. Just like when racists label all black people as a problem or all Mexicans as the problem. That's not how humanity works. You can't function that way and for any longevity into any kind of real movement. Not anymore, thank God. Not all white people were in favor of slavery, even during the height of slavery. I think about this logic, this type of logic in today's polarized society. Like, whenever somebody has an attitude of fuck Republicans or fuck Democrats, or when they think that all conservatives are this way or all liberals are that way, they're always wrong. Just like it's bad, lazy writing to make a villain in a movie like all evil, like cartoonishly, just a caricature of evil. It's bad, lazy thinking to believe that, certain real people are all bad or that they're all part of the problem. Unless you're talking about defining them by a certain behavior that defines the group that, they belong to. Like, all convicted pedophiles are bad babysitters. That's probably true. Definitely true. All convicted pedophiles are a terrible babysitting first option. That's got to be true. Right? But anyway, you get what I'm saying. On April 4th, 1968, civil rights leader Reverend Dr. Martin Luther Jr. Jesus Christ, so many fucking words. I'm going to start over. On April 4th, 1968, civil rights leader, I do understand why NPR and those kind of places, sometimes why they talk that way. It's so much easier to say words right. If you're like, on April 4th, 1968, civil rights leader Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. I mean, my pronunciation, correct percentage would go way up if I lost all passion for what I was saying and just spoke in a manner that makes 20 to 40% of the population want to kill themselves. On April 4th, 1968, civil rights leader Reverend Dr. Martin. No one talks like that, hopefully on a podcast. Anyway, the real Reverend Doctor. He's assassinated in Memphis. Years later, the King family would hire attorney William Francis Pepper to investigate King's shooting, and he would present evidence from 70 witnesses and 4,000 pages of transcripts, and Pepper alleges in his 2003 book, An Act of State, that the evidence implicated the FBI, CIA, Army, and Memphis Police Department and organized crime in the murder of King. While the government wasn't proven in court to be involved, there remains widespread speculation that they helped kill King or at least allowed it to happen. And many Panthers at the time did think that law enforcement was involved, and they were understandably fucking angry. They decided to strike back by organizing an attack on Oakland police officers, very much an eye for an eye mentality here. So 2 days later, after King's assassination, April 6, 1968, 17-year-old Panther treasurer Bobby Hutton is killed by police during a violent confrontation in West Oakland. Panthers maintain that Hutton was shot while unarmed and with his arms raised to surrender. On April 6, Cleaver and 14 other Panthers led an ambush of Oakland police officers, during which 2 officers were wounded. Cleaver was wounded during the ambush. 17-year-old, again, Black Panther member Bobby Hutton, killed. Panthers were armed with M16 rifles and shotguns. Years later, in 1980, although the Panthers would say at the time, he was unarmed, he wasn't that. Years later, in 1980, Cleaver, when Eldridge Cleaver returned to the country, after fleeing in the wake of this gun battle, charges came out of this gun battle against him, he would state that he had led the Panther group on a deliberate ambush of the police officers and provoked the shootout. He also, at this time, discredited the Black Panthers, stating, "We need police as heroes." Now, some speculated his admission could have been a payoff to the Alameda County justice system, whose judge had just days earlier let Eldridge Cleaver escape prison time. Cleaver would be sentenced to community service after getting charged with 3 counts of assault against 3 Oakland police officers. So disputing stories about who was at fault here, police or the Panthers. A documentary on Huey Newton, A Huey Newton Story, claims that Bobby Hutton was shot more than 12 times after he had already surrendered and stripped down to his underwear to prove he was not armed. So very conflicting stories there. On September 8th, 1968, a jury acquits Newton of his murder charge, but convicts him of voluntary manslaughter. And this was for that earlier, different police shootout charge. Newton is sentenced to 2 to 15 years. And then Free Huey demonstrations intensify around the nation. 2 days later, on September 10th, rifle shots are fired into Black Panther National Headquarters in Oakland. A poster in the front window of Newton holding the gun while seated in an African wicker chair is apparently the target. 2 intoxicated off-duty Oakland police officers are blamed for the incident and dismissed from the police force. So the tension between the Bay Area police and the Panthers obviously is continuing. Through the fall of 1968, activism builds around the notion that Newton is a political prisoner. The Free Huey campaign leads to the opening of Black Panther chapters in more than 20 other cities. So, a positive part of his incarceration is that it's building the movement. More and more people are joining because of, a public awareness of the Black Panthers due to their Free Huey demonstrations. And after these other chapters are opened, the Free Breakfast for Children program is launched in St. Augustine's Episcopal Church in Oakland. This Free Breakfast for Children program may be the coolest accomplishment of the Black Panthers, as far as out of just like one individual accomplishment. Inspired by contemporary research about how important the role of a good breakfast was in a kid's ability to learn. Basically, you can't pay attention in class if you're super hungry. The Panthers began to cook and serve food to the poor inner city youth of the Oakland area. The program became so popular by the end of the year that the Panthers set up kitchens in cities across the U.S., feeding over 10,000 kids every day before they went to school. In November of 1968, young Fred Hampton joins the movement. Fred Hampton, my favorite Panther. You're going to find out why here soon. Like if the Panthers were made into action figures, I would have wanted a Fred Hampton action figure. And the Fred Hampton figure would probably have to occasionally take the Eldridge Cleaver action figure aside and just whisper something like, you know that rape is super fucked up, right? Like you know that it's wrong. Like good for you for admitting it, but it cannot happen again. It should have never happened. I don't know why you're still even here. But if it happens again, I gotta put you down. Anyway, Hampton had just turned 20 years old. Just 20 when he joined the movement. He was a gifted student and a gifted athlete, dreamed of someday playing center field for the Yankees. He graduated high school in Maywood, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, with honors in 1966. He was enrolled in Triton Junior College in nearby River Grove, Illinois, studied pre-law. He and fellow Chicago area Panthers followed police, watching for brutality, using Hampton's knowledge of the law of self-defense. He also became active in the NAACP. He led 500 members and a youth council there. He was handsome, strong, charismatic. You watch some videos of this guy, and you can see right away he was a natural leader. Within a year of joining the Panthers, he was able to broker a peace treaty between some of Chicago's most powerful and violent street gangs, convincing them that continuing to kill each other would just keep them and their families entrenched in a never-ending cycle of death, poverty, and incarceration. Even more impressive, he forged an alliance between Black Panthers and the Young Patriots organization and the Young Lords. This is crazy to me. The Young Patriots organization, the YPO, they were based in a poor uptown neighborhood of Chicago known as Hillbilly Harlem, an area populated by displaced white Southerners. Many YPO members were openly racist, flaunting controversial symbols associated with Southern pride. But like blacks and Latinos, the white Young Patriots and their families experienced discrimination in Chicago in their case because they were poor and from the South. The Young Lords started off as a Puerto Rican turf gang in Chicago in 1960, had just recently evolved into a civil and human rights movement, kind of a Puerto Rican equivalent to the Black Panthers. They were opening chapters around the nation as well, and they were headquartered in Chicago. And Hampton got these two groups to align with the Black Panthers into what he called the Rainbow Coalition, a term another civil rights leader, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, would later adopt. Hampton convinced these groups and members of others that the real problem in America was not the oppression of one particular minority group, but the oppression of the working class in general, and that the only chance they had to change the system and bring about more economic equality was if they fought together instead of fighting one another. Dude, how slick was this guy? In the 1960s, as a black man, he got racist backwoods hillbillies to join his cause, right? I just picture him approaching them like one of their rallies, like approaching one of the Young Patriots at one of their rallies. I said, what do you guys stand for? Why power? I dig it, brother. Fighting for your own. Wait, what? You don't mind? You like it? You like white power? Hell yeah! White power is a lot like black power, just a different shade of the same struggle. Are you fucking with me? White power. What? Wait, that's what I say. I say, you know you're a black fella, right? White power. Now you say black power, Jethro. Come on. I say white power. You say black power. Fuck yeah, feels good, doesn't it, Jethro? Yeah, I do kind of like it. I enjoyed it. Black power. Black power. Yeah. Bang, ding, 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 ding. Black power. Ding, 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 ding. Black power. Ding, 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 ding. Black power. I don't know what do it have to. I mean, anyway, just that scene. I was just trying to build it in my head. I just love the image, if that were to happen, of Red Hampton convincing a kind of a twitchy, kind of hillbilly, racist white dude, like, "Hey, get on out of here! I don't like it. Come on, man. Just try say it one time. Just say black power. Nah, I ain't gonna say that. No time. We're all part of the same struggle. You can do it. Okay. Black power. Oh, okay. All right. I like it. It does sound good. Black power. Black power. Hampton quickly rose to becoming the leader of the Chicago chapter of the Panthers, teaching free political education classes every morning at 6 a.m., organizing a free... I don't know why that's the part that impressed me the most. Look, it was pretty cool that he taught political education classes for free to people, but he fucking did it at 6 a.m. You understand what I'm saying? He got up early. He would organize free breakfast programs for school children, so much more. And he's 20 years old. By mid-1969, he became one of the nationally known faces of the movement. Part of what led Fred to join the movement was the arrest of who would become known as the Chicago 8. You'll also see it called the Chicago 7 because the person we're going to talk about, the 8th member, was actually kind of cleared of charges and then it dropped down to 7. But anyway, I think a movie might be done in the next year or so about the Chicago 7 related to the Chicago 8. Chicago 8, arrested in 1968 in Chicago. It was around it revolved around their arrested. The 1968 Democratic National Convention was held in Chicago in late August to select that party's candidates for the November 1968 presidential election. Prior to, during the convention, which took place at the International Amphitheater in Chicago's South Side, rallies, demonstration marches, and attempted marches took place in the streets and in lakefront parks, about 5 miles from the convention site. And these activities were primarily in protest of President Johnson's policies for Vietnam. Anti-war groups had petitioned the city of Chicago for permits to march 5 miles from the central business district to within sight of the convention site to hold a number of rallies, near the convention, to camp in Lincoln Park, and to be in other lakefront parks. The city denied all the permits except for one afternoon rally at the old band shell at the south end of Grant Park. The city also enforced an 11 p.m. curfew in Lincoln Park. Confrontation with protesters ensued as the police enforced the curfew, stopped attempts to march to the International Amphitheater, and cleared crowds from the streets. The Grant Park rally on Wednesday, August 28, 1968, was attended by about 15,000 protesters. Other nearby activities involved hundreds or thousands of protesters. After the large rally outside of the venue, several thousand protesters attempted to march to the International Amphitheater, but were stopped in front of the Conrad Hilton Hotel, where the presidential candidates and their campaigns were headquartered. Police worked to push the protesters out of the street using tear gas, verbal and physical confrontation, hitting people with clubs. Protesters retaliated by throwing rocks and bottles, damaging private commercial property. The police made scores of arrests. The television networks broadcast footage of these violent clashes, powerful images. People being beat by police, people attacking the police. They're cutting away footage from presidential candidates while they're doing this. Over the course of 5 days and nights, the police made numerous arrests in addition to using tear gas, mace, batons on the marchers. Again, hundreds of police officers and protesters were injured. Dozens of journalists covering the actions were also clubbed by police or had cameras smashed or had film confiscated. In the aftermath of what was characterized as a police riot by the U.S. National Commission on the Causes and Prevention of Violence, a federal grand jury indicted 8 demonstrators and 8 police officers. And one of the 8 demonstrators indicted was Black Panther co-founder Bobby Seale, charged with conspiracy and inciting a riot. And young Fred Hampton, he's seen all this go down in his city. After being arrested, Bobby said, "To be a revolutionary is to be an enemy of the state. To be arrested for this struggle is to be a political prisoner." The evidence against Seale was very slim. He was a last-minute replacement for Eldridge Cleaver, had been in Chicago for only 2 days of the convention. During the trial, one of Seale's many protests, one of his many vocal protests, led Judge Julius Hoffman to have him bound and gagged in court. And the image of this gagged black man bound in court became a huge rallying point for the Black liberation movement. I mean, the court, it made him look like he was a slave. He was treated like an animal. On November 5th, 1969, Bobby Seale was removed from the case, but was sentenced to 4 years in prison for 16 counts of contempt in court. 3 months for each outburst. That's pretty fucked up. You get 4 years in prison because you're angry about being charged with some bullshit you didn't do, and you get angry about it in court, and then you get prison time because of that. I'm always surprised more judges and prosecutors aren't murdered. Not kidding. I'm not saying they should be. Not advocating their death. But if I was put on trial for some bullshit I didn't do, and the judge went like extra hard on me, and then I was sentenced to a long term behind bars when I was for sure innocent, man, it would be hard not to plot the death of that judge or prosecutor, or even certain jury members while I was rotting in prison. Not saying it would be right to kill a judge. I'm just saying if a judge or prosecutor ever railroads me into a guilty verdict for something I didn't do, I am probably going to try and kill you. I just want to put that out there for anybody listening. So late in 1969, she does not go well for Bobby Seale. It gets even worse for Fred Hampton, young star of the movement. This is the saddest part for me of today's episode. The qualities that made young Hampton, a rising star in the Panther movement also made him a huge target for the FBI. I cannot emphasize enough how much the FBI fucking hated the Black Panthers so much. J. Edgar Hoover would have loved to personally execute with his bare hands every member of the Black Panthers for treason in front of a live televised audience. He never said that. That is definitely the feeling you get when you look into this. Like, check this out. A few years after all this goes down, a few years after Chicago 8, and what's going to happen to Fred Hampton here, in March of 1971, a group of anonymous activists calling themselves the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI broke into a small FBI office in Pennsylvania, stole more than 1,000 FBI documents. They ended up exposing the FBI's COINTELPRO program, a secret counterintelligence program created to, as the LA Times would later put it, investigate and disrupt dissident political groups in the U.S. According to these documents, Hoover had directed all of the Bureau's offices to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, and otherwise neutralize African-American organizations and leaders, including the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the Nation of Islam, Martin Luther King, Stokely Carmichael, the Black Panthers, and more. A written goal of the FBI counterintel program was to prevent, this is a quote, to prevent the rise of a Black Messiah who could unify the movement. They also wanted to prevent the appeal of the Black Panther Party to Black youth. Like, this is a stated, written goal of the FBI. Okay, so now we know that. We know what the FBI's agenda is. Now back to 1969, Chicago, specifically December 3rd. Hampton taught a political education course that evening, not just teach them in the morning. This guy's doing good shit all the time. He taught a political education course that evening at a local church, which was attended by most members of the local Panthers. Afterwards, as was typical, several Panthers went to the Monroe Street apartment to spend the night, including Hampton's bodyguard, William O'Neill, who later admitted to being an FBI informant that had been sent in to infiltrate Hampton's chapter and get close to Hampton in exchange for dropping some criminal charges against O'Neill. O'Neill made dinner for everyone that night and slipped barbiturates into Hampton's drink to sedate him for a planned FBI raid later that evening. O'Neill left at this point, and at about 1:30 a.m., December 4th, Hampton fell asleep mid-sentence talking to his mother on the telephone. Although Hampton was not known to take drugs, Cook County chemist Eleanor Berman would report that she ran 2 separate tests, which each showed evidence of barbiturates in Hampton's blood. An FBI chemist would later fail to find similar traces, but Berman stood by her findings. Of course the FBI didn't find shit. Those murdering Hoover puppet fucks would later be found guilty by a U.S. court of illegally conspiring to destroy the Panthers, and also plan the very raid that would take Hampton's young life that night. While the FBI planned the raid, they did not take part in it. At 4 a.m., a heavily armed Cook County police force arrived at the site, divided into 2 teams, 8 in the front of the building, 6 in the rear. At 4:45 a.m., they stormed into the apartment. Mark Clark, sitting in the front room of the apartment with the shotgun in his lap, was on security duty. He was shot in the chest, died instantly. A single round was fired from his gun, caused by a reflexive death convulsion after the raiding team had shot him. That is the only shot the Panthers would fire that night. Automatic gunfire was converged at the head of the south bedroom where Hampton slept, unable to awaken as a result of the barbiturates. He was lying on a mattress in the bedroom with his fiancée, who was 9 months pregnant with their child. 2 officers found him wounded in the shoulder, and fellow Black Panther Harold Bell reported that he heard the following exchange. That's Fred Hampton. Is he dead? Bring him out. He's barely alive. He'll make it. 2 more shots were then heard, which were later found to have been fired point blank at Hampton's head. He was executed. According to Johnson, one officer then said, he's as good as dead now. No, he's good and dead now. The 7 Panthers who survived the raid were indicted by a grand jury on charges of attempted murder, armed violence, and various other weapons charges. These charges were subsequently dropped because they were bullshit, trumped-up charges. During the trial, the Chicago Police Department claimed that the Panthers were the first to fire shots. However, a later investigation found that the Chicago police fired between 90 and 99 shots, while the Panthers had fired 1 time. A decade later, in April 1979, the U.S. 7th Circuit Court of Appeals found that the FBI and its government lawyers had obstructed justice by suppressing the Black Panther Party files and concluded that there was substantial evidence to support the conclusion that the FBI defendants, in planning and executing this raid, did participate in a conspiracy designed to subvert and eliminate the Black Panther Party and its members, thereby suppressing a vital radical black political organization. The court further found there to be convincing evidence that these defendants also participated in a separate post-raid conspiracy to conceal the true character of their pre-raid and raid activities, to harass the survivors of the raid, and to frustrate any legal redress that the survivors might seek. Hampton's family and the surviving members of the raid did finally get awarded $1.85 million in a settlement from Cook County in 1982, believed to be the largest civil settlement ever awarded in a civil rights case up until that point. Given that money because of what happened that night, man, the government did not like the Black Panther movement. Literally assassinated its most prominent, most charismatic young leader. That is beyond fucked up. I mean, again, love this country, man. Great country. But anybody who's like, our government doesn't do any, get the fuck out of here. They've done all kinds of shady shit, and certain members of our government are undoubtedly doing shady shit right now. Right? No, everyone's like, no, but it's good now. No, it's not. Power corrupts, man. There are some very corrupt motherfuckers. We just don't know exactly who they are, doing very corrupt shit we'll learn like 30 years later right now. A month after Fred Hampton's government-sanctioned and administered execution, a different Black Panther leader is freed. Co-founder Huey Newton is released on $50,000 bail, pending a retrial after serving 33 months in prison for the death of Officer Frey. The Free Huey movement has won. Huey Newton has been freed. He moves into a top-floor penthouse apartment at 1200 Lakeshore Avenue in Oakland. After 2 retrials, the charges against him ultimately dropped. Newton's back. He's in charge, but his return to leadership fragments the movement. In January 1971, Newton expels Geronimo Pratt, who since 1970 had been in jail facing a pending murder charge. Geronimo was a high-ranking party member who had served 2 tours in Vietnam, heavily decorated military. If Pratt's name sounds familiar, it's because it showed up in the Tupac and Biggie Suck 76. Geronimo was Tupac Shakur's godfather. Newton also expels 2 of the New York 21 Panther members who had been arrested for a bombing plot. One of those members was Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mother. But that trial eventually collapsed, and all 21 were acquitted of all charges. Fucking FBI, man. Dedicated to destroying the Black Panther Party through continued indictments and incarceration of its members and leaders. Trumped up indictments, bullshit incarceration. Newton also expelled his own secretary, who flees the country, kicks her out of the movement. Newton and various other Panthers believed the Black Panthers should participate in local government and social services, while others thought the Black Panther Party should be in constant conflict with police. And basically, Newton starts to kick out everyone who doesn't agree with his side of what they should focus on. Now, Eldridge Cleaver, guy we talked about earlier, he's on the side of fighting 24/7, 365 days a year. And he gets kicked out too, even though he's basically already out. Cleaver hadn't really been involved in a consistent, meaningful way with the movement outside of rhetoric since 1968, when he fled to Cuba to avoid trial for an attempted murder charge that sprang from that involvement, or his involvement in that ambush on Oakland police officers we talked about already that resulted in the death of Bobby Hutton. After a brief stay in Cuba, hanging out with Fidel Castro, Eldridge had bounced to Algeria when Castro learned that the CIA had been keeping tabs on Eldridge, and since the CIA wanted Castro dead, Castro wanted no part of anyone who was also, in their crosshairs. Eldridge set up an International Panther office in Algeria, a nation friendly to black revolutionaries that would not extradite them to the United States. Eldridge also took a few trips to North Korea after befriending Kim Jong-il. The Black Panther Party's publications actually began to reprint excerpts from Kim Il-sung's writings. Man, talk about going from the frying pan into the fire. Why would you fucking align yourself with North Korea? America in general was not a friend of the black man in the 1960s. And I know in some ways it still isn't in certain factions. But holy shit, North Korea wasn't. North Korea wasn't and isn't a friend to any human being on Earth whose name isn't Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, or Kim Jong-un. May 25th, 1971, co-founder Bobby Seale gets some good news. He has his murder conspiracy case against him dismissed in New Haven, Connecticut. That was following a suspension of his contempt of court convictions in Chicago. He's freed after 21 months in jail. There's just a series of charges against these guys, most of which get dropped because they were just trying to incarcerate them to just to gut the movement. While serving his 4-year sentence for those contempt of court convictions earlier, the ones that, where he was fucking bound and gagged in court, Seale had been put on trial again in 1970 in the New Haven Black Panther trials. Several officers of the Panther organization had murdered a fellow Panther, Alex Rackley, who had allegedly confessed under torture to being a police informant. The organization's getting paranoid because they're constantly being infiltrated. The leader of the murder plan, Leader George Sams Jr., turned state's evidence, testified that Seale, who had visited New Haven only hours before the murder, was the one to order him to kill Rackley. The trials were accompanied by a large protest at the trial in New Haven. The jury was unable to reach a verdict. 1971 is a terrible year overall for the Panthers. Hundreds of party members quit the Black Panther Party around the nation, alarmed by both the split between Huey Newton and other members and the violence against its own members, by different factions, brought to light most notably by Bobby Seale's case. It will be discovered later that the FBI had sent Newton and Eldridge and other Black Panther members various bogus letters, just manipulating them, stoking anger between the two. And they had different, plans in each group. They'd be like, fucking Eldridge, man, he's been saying some crazy shit. This guy over here, he wants you fucking dead. Like they just put people in their organizations to constantly, foster an environment of paranoia and just get the members to kill each other. In 1971, the FBI actually dedicated a budget of $7.4 million to pay informers to harass and intimidate the Panthers. That is more than twice the amount they budgeted for informers and organized crime that year. Between 1969 and 1971, at least 4 Panthers were shot to death by other Panthers because of feuds created and perpetuated by FBI informants. In early 1972, Newton shuts down various Black Panther chapters around the country due to infighting created because of FBI disinformation. Hoover eventually calls the FBI off of the Panthers, satisfied that they will continue to tear each other apart. And we know that based on statements and leaked FBI documents. The underground remnants of the Los Angeles Black Panthers chapter eventually reemerge as the Crips, a powerful street gang that advocated social reform before it got into crime. Did you know that Crips may stand for Community Resources for Independent People? I didn't either before this suck. I swear to God. This isn't one of my weird lies. Bloods and Crips suck. Anyone. I think it'd be fascinating. Can our space lizards please vote that up? And full disclosure, while some gang historians do point to the Crips coming out of the Black Panther Party, others say that the word Crip evolved out of the word crib, a word gang founders Tukey Williams and Raymond Washington possibly used to describe various factions of their gangs. I'll look further into the etymology of the word Crip if we hopefully suck that topic someday. Okay, so the Black Community Survival Conference is held at the Oakland Civic Auditorium on March 29th, 1972. This is one of the last kind of big cool things the Panthers were able to pull off. 10,000 bags of groceries are given away with canned goods on the bottom, packaged goods in the middle, and a 4-pound chicken in every bag. Pretty cool. June 24th, 1972, Bobby Seale announces his candidacy for mayor of Oakland. Panther Elaine Brown announces her candidacy for city council. Both lose. Elaine Brown does remain a social activist living in Oakland to this day. This hurts the party. It's just just a sign that they're not gaining momentum. They're losing power now. In early 1974, leader Huey Newton embarks on a major Black Panther Party purge, expelling co-founder Bobby Seale and Bobby's younger brother John. He kicks out numerous other top party leaders. Dozens of other Panthers loyal to Seale resign or desert. In August of 1974, Newton allegedly murders Kathleen Smith, a teenage prostitute, and is also charged with pistol whipping his tailor, Preston Callens. Weird side note on that crime. Supposedly, if he did kill them, he killed them because he was getting pretty heavy into drugs around this point and was, because kind of had a hair-trigger temper, and supposedly both just referred to him as Baby, which was a nickname he had as a kid that he fucking hated. Newton reportedly confides to friends that Smith is his first non-political murder. He flees to Cuba. Elaine Brown takes over leadership in his absence. For all intent and purposes, the movement's dead at this point. Barely hanging on in Oakland. Really only surviving through a few social programs, most notably the Oakland Community School, which had opened in 1973 to educate the children of Panthers. Had about 150 kids attending it. In December of 1974, Panther accountant Betty Van Patter is murdered after threatening to disclose irregularities in the party's finances. Van Patter goes missing on December 12, 1974, and her severely beaten corpse is found on a San Francisco Bay beach. Newton later allegedly confesses to friends that he ordered Van Patten's murder, and Van Patten had been tortured and raped before being killed. In 1977, Newton returns from Cuba to face murder charges, but not before meeting People's Temple leader, former Suck subject, and Jonestown cult leader Jim Jones in Havana. How weird is that? Remember Jimmy Jones? Strange Jimmy Jones. Jimmy was a diehard communist by 1977 and a former major figure in the Bay Area civil rights movement where they had met previously. What a crazy connection. Newton actually spoke to Temple members in Jonestown via telephone, expressing support for Jim Jones and what he was doing in Guyana. Anyone familiar with the Jonestown Massacre knows that the communist experiment Jim created did not work out too well in the end. Newton's cousin, Stanley Clayton, was one of the few residents of Jonestown to escape the area before the 1978 mass murder of roughly 900 Temple members by Jones and his fanatics through forced suicide through drinking that Flavor Aid. In October 1977, 3 Black Panthers attempt to assassinate Crystal Gray, a key prosecution witness in Newton's upcoming trial, who had been present the day of Kathleen Smith's murder. The organization, once based in the liberation of Black Americans, has now devolved into little more than a gang. Unbeknownst to the assailants, they attacked the wrong house, and the occupant returned fire. During the shootout, one of the Panthers, Lewis Johnson, was killed. The other 2 assailants escaped. During Newton's trial for assaulting Preston Callens changed his testimony several times. Eventually told the jury he didn't know who assaulted him. That's suspicious. Newton was acquitted of the assault in September 1978. He was convicted of illegal firearms possession. After the assassination attempt on Crystal Gray, she declined to testify against Newton. So after 2 trials and 2 deadlocked juries, the prosecution decided not to retry Newton for Smith's murder. Then in 1980, Newton earned a PhD in the social philosophy program of the history of consciousness at the University of California, Santa Cruz. 1982, the remnants of the Black Panther Party officially and totally dissolve. The Oakland Community School closes. Newton is charged with embezzling $600,000 from the school. He's sentenced to 6 months after pleading no contest to stealing $15,000 in state aid intended for the school. 7 years later, on August 22nd, 1989, Huey Newton, 47 years old, is shot to death on a West Oakland street by gang member Tyrone Robinson, allegedly over a drug deal. Robinson is convicted of murder. Newton had been allegedly involved in drug dealing, according to numerous interviews with former Panthers for years by this point. The other co-founder, Bobby Seale, is alive and well. 82 years young, still touring the country as a social activist. How cool is that shit? You can find Bobby Seale's schedule by Googling his name and then clicking the news results and digging around. He does have a website, but the website is the website one would expect from an 82-year-old man. It does not have tour dates. Someone help Bobby out. And that takes us out of today's Timesuck Timeline.
Good job, soldier. You made it back. Barely.
No idiots of the internet today, because it's essentially just a repeat of last week's idiots of the internet. Just replace anti-Semitic rhetoric with even more aggressive anti-black rhetoric. And then add tons of aggressively anti-white racism. And then add a bunch of death to all cops rhetoric. Are there a lot of good comments as well? Yeah, there are. The history of Panthers is a complicated one, man. Black Americans, including the Panthers, were for sure oppressed. They were the victims of untold incidents of police brutality. They were the victims of a government conspiracy to take them down, the victims of racism. And then sadly, many also became racist themselves. I just can't get behind that. I don't like the rally of black power, like I said earlier, any more than the rally of white power. It's meat sack power. Meat sack power or no power for me. Hail Nimrod. The fight to me is about greater economic equality and equal opportunity to fight for your dreams, for every color of meat sack. I guess I'm more Dr. King than Malcolm X. But easy for me to say as a white dude. Again, easy for me to say. Never had a cop get rough with me. Never been asked to use a separate bathroom or been threatened by strangers due to the color of my skin. Many Panthers took anger, towards many racist cops, which I get as much as I can, and turned that into rage towards all cops, which I can't condone. But again, easy for me to say, easy for me to play armchair revolutionary. Do I think that everything the Panthers did was great? Obviously, no. But I'm glad they existed because much of what they did and stood for and symbolized was, I feel, necessary to enact social change, social changes that needed to happen. At their best, they were fucking superheroes. Real superheroes, not Marvel creations. They bravely showed other oppressed Black Americans that you do not have to just bend over and take it. You can stand up and stand up proud for your rights. And I think the Black America needed them to do that in the 1960s. And they were also complicated. They were imperfect heroes like all real-life heroes are. And some of them became villains. Some of them were villains posing as revolutionaries. It was a very fragmented group. Just like all cops weren't bad, all Panthers weren't good. Cleaver comes off like a fucking maniac. To me, hard to get behind a guy who blames committing rape on racial oppression. Fred Hampton comes across like a savior. He was the Black Messiah that the FBI was so afraid of. Would love to pop into an alternate reality, some other dimension where the FBI and Chicago police did not murder him in cold blood and just see what amazing shit he did for not only Black America, but for America in general. That saying, only the good die young, seems to have been written about him. Dude seems from every single thing I could find written about him, from every speech I watched him give, to be a fucking saint of a human being. Then there was co-founder Huey Newton. Such a complicated dude, man. He did a lot of good with the social justice programs, but then may have also killed several people. I watched interviews with several former high-ranking Panthers that said that, he was just never the same after he was freed from prison. His mood was unpredictable. He allegedly assaulted verbally, physically, and even sometimes sexually several other Panther members. Some former members said he was a violent, drug-addicted psychopath in his later years ruling the Panthers. But Newton was also publicly a very important symbol for young Black Americans. He was handsome. He was strong. Dude was fucking jacked. Looked like an action figure. He was brave. He didn't take shit from anyone, especially if they were white. He was charismatic. He was an incredibly intelligent leader. He didn't just get a doctorate handed to him. I should also point out that there wasn't just dudes in the Panthers. There were a lot of female members. And I feel terrible for many of them. Even though they were part of a revolution against oppression, against racism, they still faced oppression internally. They still faced sexism from both white and Black America. The Panthers were still a patriarchal organization, and many of them, of the women, left early in the movement. How much must that have sucked? To be fighting a fight for equal rights based on your skin color, only to have to also fight a fight within your revolution for equal rights based on your genitalia. Never thought this suck would lead me to think about Oprah Winfrey, but it did. Oprah Winfrey, man, she became an industry leader. As a Black woman in America, I got a little glimpse of into how hard that must be. A tiny glimpse in this suck. Hail Lucifina. Always liked Oprah. But respect her even more right now. I feel like hitting this fucking button again. Yes, I get it. As much as I can get it. Holy shit. What Black women specifically have had to overcome in this country is fucking mind-boggling. No wonder Aretha sang the shit out of this song. So what's the legacy of the Panthers? What is their lasting impact? In a word, it's complicated. At their worst, for an organization founded as a response to racism, many of their members ended up being pretty racist themselves. At their best, extremely inspirational. They inspired a new generation of Black Americans to be strong, to love themselves, to love being Black, to not lay down and give up when it came to racism. Real stories just don't often fit into convenient narratives that play out like they're written for a TV melodrama. Life is fucking complicated. You can think that the Black Panthers were freedom-fighting, inspirational heroes, and you're right. And you can think that the Black Panthers were violent, racist, cop-killing criminals. And you're right. It depends on which one you're talking about and which era. And it's just, again, so complicated. What I love about the Panthers, what I found most inspiring about this suck was their fighting spirit. It is so easy just to take it in life. So easy just to bitch and never actually fight. Really fight for what you believe in. So easy to talk about, to talk the talk, but not walk the walk. The Panthers, while you may not agree with some or even any of their messages, they walked the fuck out of their talk, right? They stood up for their convictions. They fought for their convictions. Some of them fucking died for those convictions. Outmanned and outgunned, they refused to stand down when it came to standing up to the man. They fought the powers that be. I got Public Enemy going in my head now. And the powers that be may have won, but they still fought them. How many of us have ever fought for our ideals as hard as some of the Panthers fought for theirs? Something to think about. Time now for top 5 takeaways.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Number 1, the Black Panther Party, originally named the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, was an African-American revolutionary party founded in 1966 in Oakland, California by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale. The party's original purpose was to patrol African-American neighborhoods to protect residents from acts of police brutality. Number 2, the Black Panthers formed in the wake of Malcolm X's assassination and during a period of tremendous social upheaval and unrest in America when riots and protests were commonplace in America and when African Americans were statistically extremely disproportionately disenfranchised compared to any other race of Americans. Number 3, California's comparatively tough gun laws can be traced back to the Mulford Act of 1967, a law passed in response to the Black Panthers. I had no idea the Black Panthers inspired a trend to push for tighter and tighter gun control measures that have continued to this day. Number 4, the Black Panther Party officially dissolved in 1982 and co-founder Huey Newton died in a drug-related murder in 1989. Newton's funeral was held at Allen Temple Baptist Church, where he was a member. Some 1,300 mourners were accommodated inside, and another 500 to 600 listened to the service from outside. The other co-founder, Bobby Seale, continues to preach social activism and stand up to the man to this day. Would somebody please help him with his website? And number 5, new info. Let's talk for a second about the new Black Panthers. There is currently a black nationalist organization in the United States called the Black Panthers. Or the new Black Panthers. They formed in Dallas, Texas in 1989. They consider themselves to be the successors to the original Black Panther Party. They are not. Co-founder Bobby Seale has been very, very clear over and over again. I've watched him say it in speeches. He cannot stand them. In a speech I watched, Mr. Seale tells the audience that they deserve a huge thumbs down and that what they stand for is totally antithetical to what Bobby's Panthers stood for when he began the movement. The Southern Poverty Law Center, the group that helped cut the balls off the KKK in America, labels the new Black Panther Party a hate group. They preach insanely racist rhetoric. They are not revolutionaries. They're hate mongers. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, one of the party's future leaders, at this point, when he said this in 1994, said, "Our lessons talk about the bloodsuckers of the poor. It's that old no-good Jew, that imposter Jew, that old hook-nosed, bagel-eating, lox-eating, Johnny-come-lately, perpetrating a fraud, just crawled out of the caves and hills of Europe, so-called damn Jew." He said that in a fucking speech in 1994. King Samir Shabazz, former head of the party's Philadelphia chapter, said the following in a National Geographic documentary in 2009. He said, just straight up, "I hate white people, all of them. Every last iota of a cracker, I hate it. We didn't come out here to play today. There's too much serious business going on in the black community to be out here sliding through South Street with white, dirty, cracker, whore bitches on our arms, and we call ourselves black men. What the hell is wrong with you, black man? You're at a doomsday with the white girl on your damn arm. We keep begging white people for freedom. No wonder we're not free. Your enemy cannot make you free, fool. You want freedom? You're going to have to kill some crackers. You're going to have to kill some of their babies." Wow. Well, King Samir, you have just had your invite to join the cult of the curious fucking revoked. We don't like that attitude. You're not on Team Meat Sack. You don't get to join the private Facebook group, and you're not welcome on Discord. And I changed your name to King Go Fuck Yourself. Hail Nimrod.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Whew. Black Panthers have been sucked. Man, that was a tricky suck. I worked a lot of extra hours on that one. A lot of overtime, so much to absorb, so much to consider. I feel like I could spend weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks on that one, months, and still be like, I should have said this or I should have said that. I hope I did it some justice. Hope my black meat sacks know I love them. Hope my white meat sacks know I love them too. And hope my law enforcement meat sacks know I love you guys and gals. And that you don't deserve to be unjustly attacked any more than citizens do. To quote arguably the most famous victim of police brutality in the past several decades, Rodney King, can we all just get along? Okay, thank you to the Timesuck team. Thanks to Queen of the Suck, Lindsey Cummins, High Priestess of the Suck, Harmony Vellicamp, Jesse Guardian of Grammar Dobner, Reverend Dr. Joe Paisley, Timesuck, High Priest Alex Dugan, the guys at Bit Elixir, Danger Brain, Axis Apparel, Sophie, Fact, Sorceress Evans. Thanks for the fine research to get me started. Great meeting you in person, by the way, Sophie, in New Jersey, at the Stress Factory. I got the shirt on right now, Jersey Stress Factory. let's talk about a community real quick. Have you joined the Cult of Curious private Facebook group? Have you? And again, Samir, fuck, not you. Not you. There's almost 7,000 Timesuckers in the private Cult of Curious group on Facebook, maybe more actually now, and almost 1,500 Discord members. Link to the Discord chat room messaging app right on the Timesuck app. Link to the private Facebook group and the Discord channel also in today's episode description. Next week, I encourage more potential controversy with the Space Lizard chosen topic of Pedophile Island. What is Pedophile Island? The Washington State Department of Social and Health Services operates Special Commitment Center, SCC programs that provide specialized mental health treatment for civilly committed sex offenders who have completed their prison sentences. The island was initially considered Uncle Secret's Island and Brother Touchy Fingers, but they went with Special Commitment Center. Of course, that's fucked up. Not true. Superior courts in the county in which an individual was previously convicted of a sex crime have the authority now in Washington to determine if individuals meet the legal definition of a sexually violent predator and then can civilly commit them to the SCC, which is legal speak for sending them to an island where they're not allowed to leave after their prison sentence has been completed. And they're just kept there until they're no longer deemed a threat to sexually reoffend. They could potentially be kept there until they die. Is this the best way to deal with pedophiles? How big of a problem are pedophiles? How many are out there? How often do they victimize? How many lives have been negatively affected by pedophiles and other sex offenders? Do they even deserve rehabilitation? Can they even be rehabilitated? Tune in next Monday for a deep dive on a very uncomfortable subject. Tune in now for today's Timesucker Updates.
Updates? Get your Timesucker updates.
First update is felt very apropos today for today's topic. The first update comes in from a longtime law enforcement sucker I've met several times who wishes to remain unnamed in this message. And he writes, "Hey guys, I wanted to bring this to your attention. I know how much you appreciate the sacrifices made by law enforcement in this country. Lucas Dowell embodies everything his last name implies. Do well." Yeah, Dowell is spelled do well. And this anonymous Timesucker sent me a link to an article about Virginia State Trooper Lucas B. Dowell, who was killed when someone inside a home fired a weapon at police executing a search warrant during a recent drug investigation. The person who killed Trooper Dowell, identified by police as Corey Johnson of Cumberland County, was shot and killed by police. And our fellow Meatsack continues with, "I trained him when he first hit the road, and he was a shift partner for many years before leaving the Charlottesville area." Man, I am so sorry, buddy, this happened. If you do mention anything on a future episode, please leave my name out of it. Yep, I don't want to detract anything away from this. I don't bring this to you because I want sympathy or attention. He was a good trooper, the kind everyone would be proud to have working for them, and everyone should know the sacrifice he made. And then he writes, "Whether you are for or against drugs, I hope none of our listeners is for killing cops. This is just the kind of thing I think about when people refer to drug use as a victimless crime. I don't mean to offend anyone, but I just learned of this as it happened about 9 hours ago, and I'm still processing my anger. Thank you for who you are and what you believe in. Thank you for the Cult of the Curious." Thank you, man. And absolutely terrible that this happened. I am so glad, though, that you did send in a message right away. How perfect for this week. Just a reminder that, yes, there are a lot of great law enforcement officers out there, and they sacrifice so much to keep us safe, to keep people of every color safe. And there are law enforcement officers of every color. Thank you for being an incredible law enforcement officer. I base that on numerous interactions I've had with you and the many stories you've sent in over the past few years. Thoughts go out with you. Obviously, I can't name you on the show, but thanks for sending this message in. Now we'll shift gears, lighten things up with a hilarious message from Timesucker Haley Ford, who writes, "Dan, I listened to the inspirational episode." This is one of the ones over the holidays. "And you talked about how the mom ate peanut butter while she was pregnant and her baby's and it ended up causing her baby skeleton to grow outside of its body. I flipped the ever-loving fuck out. I eat peanut butter all the time and I'm 3 weeks away from delivering. I was so convinced that my baby was I was so convinced that my baby was going to have an exoskeleton, which is fucking stupid because this is my second baby and I've seen 3D ultrasounds of her. She is not, in fact, an ant baby, you fuckface. Every episode, you say some shit that gets me. The first one I can remember was during the episode about Teddy Roosevelt. You said that the teddy bear was named after him because he got caught wearing a women's teddy. Totally believed you. It's literally happened during every episode. I believed you like many others when you mentioned that people used to fuck dogs in caves or some shit. And I believed you because of the Toy Box Killer episode. I was like, oh, so maybe he just had that nasty desire too. And it made complete sense to me. You're an asshole. On a separate note, I love your podcast. I'm finally caught up and having withdrawals. I love that you donate money every month and that you've changed so many people's lives. I have become much more open-minded and even enjoyed the podcasts I didn't want to listen to. I love hearing that. I forced myself to listen to all of them, ended up loving all of them because of the way you present the information and the gotchas you throw into each one. I know lately I feel like I've been pulling a little bit away from because I want people to get lulled into a false sense of security. On a separate note, I know you get so many requests for shout-outs, but I would so much appreciate it if you could give my boyfriend Dominic a shout-out. He is the most amazing person. He works on the weekends doing side jobs to make extra money for us. Then comes home and cooks and plays with our 3-year-old daughter. Like I mentioned before, we're having our second daughter on the 25th. He has gone above and beyond to make sure that we're ready for her arrival. To give you an example of the kind of person he is, we were driving around one day and it was ridiculously hot outside. This was back when he drove around conducting CNA hospice visits, and we saw a homeless man on the side of the road that he apparently saw frequently. He told me that he keeps a case of water bottles in his car, and when he has the chance, he gives the homeless water bottles so they don't have to become dehydrated. He is unbelievably caring and selfish and does what he can for anyone and everyone around him, even if he doesn't know them. He's the best thing to ever happen to me and my little girls, and he is the one that introduced me to your comedy and Timesuck, so I love him even more. He's an inspiration to me every day. I understand if you're not able to announce this, but it would mean the world to me if he heard you read this. Smiley face. Again, thank you, you beautiful sucker, for all you do. Hoping to be a spacer soon so we can help keep Timesuck going. Haley Ford. Thank you, Haley. And thank you, Dominic, for being a good dude. Love how much you two are in love. Man, life is fucking short. Spend as much of it as you can with love in your hearts. I don't care if that sounds corny as fuck. It's true. Love, love. Says the angry, bearded, air banjo playing Idaho man. Now a Mothman update coming in from Timesucker John Dvorak. John writes, most holy pontificated Pope of suck. I write to inform you that Rich Haddam, the screenwriter of the Richard Gere Mothman Prophecies film, admitted to completely making up the Mothman at Chernobyl thing. I did not know that. I love these updates. The film ends by alluding to other Mothman sightings from around the globe. Oh, I don't think I ever watched it to that point, I guess, or I just forgot. It's been so many years. The podcast Astonishing Legends plugged Timesuck many moons ago, and their endorsement is how I arrived at the Cult of the Curious. I love both Timesuck and Astonishing. Yeah, me too, man. Oh, those guys are great. And well, Rich Haddam is a friend of theirs and has been on a few Astonishing episodes. He specifically admits that he made the whole Chernobyl thing up. So no Mothman there, John. Thank you, John. Man, I love those kind of updates. Yeah, because I did not come across that. And now another funny one. This one, this one killed me. This is, I believe this is the last one for today. Subject line of "You're such an asshole." This comes in from Timesucker Greg Hawk. To our fearless Suckmaster, I truly love your podcast. I'm a mailman. I am in and out of businesses, walking through neighborhoods, and driving along servicing curbside mailboxes. It's usually mind-numbing, lonely work. I listen to various podcasts throughout the day through earbuds because of you mainly. I look forward to your podcast like no other. I listen to fucking yes! Your show informs and entertains me through 2 parts of my work week. I'm an OG Space Lizard. Oh, man, thank you for being a Space Lizard. It used to be 3, but I'll forgive you for that. Oh, yeah, the bonus sucks were fucking killing me. Listening today to the Black Death episode, I knew I would be using a new sign-off for my emails. I have been using my favorite quote from your shows. Loved everything about it. Wouldn't change a thing. 2 out of 5 stars. That joke's still funny. Originally, that was going to be the entirety of my email today. But then the letter you read to close the show changed the tone of this missive. It's one thing to be walking along delivering mail and have to stop what I'm doing because I'm laughing so hard that snot bubbles are forming, but it's something else to have to wipe away tears and be sniffling like a prepubescent girl that just got her heart broken by the boy in class that ignored her. How about a heads up, you asshole? How about a fucking spoiler alert or something? That letter was so well written and so poignant, I contend that only a cyborg wouldn't sniffle a little after hearing you read that. That poor man has all the sympathy I have to give. I can only imagine the hell he's experiencing. It is truly one of the worst things that a parent can go through. I've had scares with my kids and grandkids now, but nothing in comparison to this. Thank you for your decision to make the Spacers donation to help in some small way. I'll be adding a check of my own in the following days. Load the Greg, aim the Greg, fire the Greg. Hail Nimrod, Greg Hark. Perfect note to end on today, Greg. Thanks for being so great, man. And I'll end with that as well. Load the Greg. Aim the Greg. Fire the Greg.
Thanks, time suckers. I needed that.
We all did.
Have a great week, everyone. Another Secret Suck on Thursday for you space lizards. Thank you again for the donation money. Pedophile Island next Monday. And if you start a revolution this week, please let every meat sack of every color be a part of it. And make sure, while you're freedom fighting, that you keep on sucking. Ding, 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 ding. Joe, I need some air bass. Ding, ding, bang, ding, 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 ding. God damn it, Paisley, air bass! Get in here! Get in here! Ding, 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 ding. You can't hear it.